I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting to order. We have, was there proof of notification?
We're posted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have a 17-point agenda. I'll entertain a motion. Luck, seconded by Cooey. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have an agenda. Previous meeting minutes, I read those carefully and they seem pretty exact as to what we discussed. So I'll entertain a motion to approve those. Manning,
Sorry.
seconded by Cooey. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Action items, number 5, discussion and possible action on 2023 budget guidance and planning. Administrator Langrick.
Mr. Chair, items today, and it's kind of put together, as if you will, as kind of a checklist on the different materials that we have to try to arrive at decision points that we need to cross. So that the budget guidance is in there as promised from last meeting, is that it can still be discussed and amended and action taken on it. It kind of coincides also with the worksheet that is trying to help shape what 2023 looks like and beyond. I think, Mr. Chair, if I could be so bold, I might skip ahead and kind of bring up a document that's attached with item number 8. I have a running report that's put together that's underneath the same item as the worksheet. I think it may be to our advantage if I went kind of through that running report to answer some of the questions from previous meetings and to kind of set some of the context on the different changes and such as that you'll see today. If you're okay with that, Mr.
Thank you. I would like you to do that. I read that and it answered a lot of questions I had. So please.
Okay, so let me pull that up, and that's going to be for folks in your packets or folks online. That's going to be item number 08B, Financial Planning Running Report, 26 July. So the intentions of the running report is it's intended to help track the clarifications, recommendations, data amendments, committee questions, considerations, worksheet amendments, and requests. So as we work through this again, please keep in mind that the immediate objective is a 2023 budget, a 2023 capital borrowing plan, and 2023 borrowing. The worksheet and the capital management plan are designed to make changes and amendments on them. And the intent of this report is to try to track those many changes so we don't get lost on when things are changing and why they possibly have changed. So first item is an item of clarification, Health and Human Services budget. And referencing the June 22nd county conditions report, there was slide 6 of 67 depicted health and social services. Health and social services, again, health and social services accounting for 35.12% of county expenditures. Now I'm stressing social services because that is the definition that we're defining that chunk of
Administrator Langrick, you misspoke. It was 53.12.
Oh, thank you. 53.12. Do I got it up on the screen? I can't read my own typing here. So that is the name that we're using for the chunk of the pie that captures that, what puts us in compliance with the language that's required for a county budget or a municipal budget underneath state statute. As discussed in previous meetings, this is the total expenditure from various services and departments, including Pine Valley Health and Human Services, child and adult institutional placements, health, child support, veterans, elderly, and nutrition. This one data point does not account for revenues brought in by these services or an understanding of levy distribution. In context of health and human services, that one specific department from that group, of levy distribution, approximately $835,755.89 is dispersed for the HHS's 2022 core budget. $31,607.37 is dispersed for elderly services. $36,982.89 is dispersed for nutrition. $785,000 and $7,000 are are dispersed for adult and child institutional placements. This is a total of $2,389,346.15 of a total $10,447,277.17 levy, or approximately 23% of our county levy. So I think that was brought to the attention of many supervisors from your constituents on why is Health and Human Services that big of a chunk. And again, that's in context of an expenditure line. It doesn't equate to a considerations for revenues, and it doesn't equate to the conversation on direct levy impact.
Administrator Langrick, if I could be so bold, I would like to make sure everyone understands that whereas 53% of the total budget, and that's from all revenue sources, including the levy, but also includes state and federal monies that we collect for maintaining the roads, for doing things through Health and Human Services. And then the smaller units also get federal and state money. We do get a few user fees along the way. But so all of those things in the aggregate account to 53% of the total, the $37 or $8 million budget. But only 23% of the money that goes to Health and Human Services, 23% of their money actually comes from the levy. So I want everyone to be clear on that. I remember the pie graph, it was alarming to see 53% of our money spent over in Health and Human Services. Well, that's because it was talking about the total budget. And it included Pine Valley, it included Veteran Services, it included child placement. So I want everyone to understand that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Continuing on, budget breakdown and understanding department expenditures and revenues. We created a folder in your Finance and Personnel Committee standing folder to try to house our finance worksheets and all of our many tracking things that we hope to have here. It's been asked to also include them in the meeting folders for easier reference, but we're hoping to also use that space to go back and reference these financial planning documents that we use rather than trying to go back and guess what meetings that we discuss them in. With that as well as a document was prepared through Derek Kalish, Clerk Kalish's office, is our part-time and partial finance officer. He put together a revised revision of the department distribution by levy. It's underneath your folder, underneath item 009J. So that is in your packet and in the folder for your viewing. Moving on, recommendations from the administrator. So here's a couple points that I just kind of want to bring out in general. I'd recommend the Finance and Personnel Committee not lose sight of the following. Number one, the 2023 budget process has begun and timely decisions will be needed to shape that budget with desired priorities. The 2023 Capital Improvement Program will shape potential 2023 borrowing. Keep in mind, we'll need a 3/4 vote authorization resolution in September to advance with the 2023 borrowing. An amount and project authorization will also be needed. Keep in mind that the committee controls the flow of funding. At the end of the day, increasing and decreasing budget line items are what the committee has at its immediate controls. I know that we're certainly the secondary impacts of how that impacts services, how that impacts the public, and all those things are important talking points, and we want to try to understand those the best we can. But please don't lose sight on, the controls at our hands here are to adjust numbers. Number four, if there is a desire or recommendation to change the assumptions and projections built into the 2023 guidance language and the projections of the financial planning worksheet, I would encourage supervisors to bring forward their ideas to change those by making a motion earlier rather than later. Examples, if we want to consider, and it's in the interest, is determined by the group to impact wages, benefits, revenue projections, department items, please make your priorities known early. Number five, focus discontent of recommendations and materials on myself as the administrator. If you're dissatisfied with the elements of the projections, the recommendations as presented, the data, please keep your discontent focused on myself, as I am overall responsible party for these, for the information being presented to you. Departments have been advised to refrain from participating in public conversation or recommendations regarding cutting from other departments not related to their own department or shared function. Departments have also been advised on engaging in behavior of holding the highest priority functions hostage in the face of reductions. Example being, if you as a group say we're going to cut the administrator's budget, it would be inappropriate for me to go and say, well, then we're going to not do payroll, or taking some primary type of a function and saying, we can't do that. So I've given guidance to my folks on that. At the same time, if they do have ideas, understandings, questions that they have regarding other departments, those can still be funneled and teased out through myself, but trying very much to avoid having departments taking shots at each other in public meetings on where they think from their view that the other department should be cutting or cutting expenditures, so that we don't lead to discourse like that. Number 7, the nature of these decisions are very subjective, and the decisions made will reflect how the county prioritizes services and manages funds. Data sets can help provide objective comparisons and perhaps some rational consideration points. However, it is my opinion that in the end, these decisions are going to remain subjective. Number 8, I would recommend the Finance and Personnel consider the directive resolutions either as presented or with amendments to help shape conditions in which supervisory committees and departments are solving problems under established constraints. Without directives, a lot of problem solving will fall to the administrator's office and Finance and Personnel. A discussion point that I've brought up a couple times now, that if we don't shape it at the situation where we're all understanding what the context and the constraints are going to be for everybody, it's going to be kind of on this group to make our best judgments. And then professionalism, encouraging everyone to continue with a high level of professionalism. I was made aware of offense taken on some comments that were made in levity and sarcasm. So again, just another iteration on the gravity of the situation, that some of those things that we mean to lighten the mood or say in jest may be found offensive. Presentation of data amendments in the conditions report, as I reported last meeting, or maybe even the meeting prior now, for our full-time equivalencies, recommended that is a change to 230 to reflect full-time employees. But I think we took action to not consider that as part of the potential report, as well as a typo on the summary report of 1.2 million. Questions coming from committee members. Question on the planning worksheet. Why aren't there any numbers in some of the line items? Answer: the worksheet captures the items that are placeholders for ideas, initiatives that have not been costed or proposed to implement. So some of the ones that don't have numbers were not costed. That we didn't take any type of initiative to enact those, but it still kind of stays there as an idea on if you want to do this, we're not losing that thought. Question on the capital plan, currently planning to use $500,000 in short-term borrowing annually through 2027. This is for highway. What would it take to arrive at a 20-year life cycle on county trunks? The answer: the increase, if we increase to $800,000 annually. However, the county would have to consider that $500,000 is built on the presumptions of state aid limits. Additional state funds may not be available, and repairs may be 100% levy versus shared with the state aid rationed to counties. Current recommendation from administrator and commissioner is to distribute 500,000 short-term notes to highway trunk repair and maintenance unless state aid programs were to change in the near future. Next question on staffing: should we consider a staffing study? For brevity's sake, we did reach out to Carlson. They said it would depend on the scope and such if they wanted to get involved. A condensed comparable study has been put together and is in your packets today underneath items provided under your packet and on the internet. Question: can we see budget breakdown by departments? As discussed, we do have a revised sheet that's in your packet today. Question: can we get more information on referendum to exceed levy limits? And this is already back from July 13, and as we're all aware here, we're going to have a meeting on Thursday with our first ad hoc committee regarding what a referendum procedure looks like and trying to arrive at a question. Question: financial planning worksheet. Where are health insurance projections in the financial plan? The answer to this is in section 1, pages 2 of 17 are in line C4. You'll see that the financial planning worksheet contains general employee impacts and the estimated impacts on the levy. The section 5 that you'll see in the worksheet is intended for health insurance adjustments to the assumptions. We're currently exploring 3 different options, but if we want to make changes in premium shares or all those types of things, we kind of have section 5 of that spreadsheet reserved to have those tinkering.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead. Sean, is it Sean that asked
Yep.
that?
Yep.
I don't have your picture in front of me, but go ahead.
I'm right in front of you. I'm in person. I'm real.
Oh, there you are.
I walked in late.
I missed you.
I am just wondering, this is more a question for you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if I read this 11-page document before we got here today, but there's quite a bit of other stuff, and I'm wondering if it's okay if we move on to the other things. He's answered a lot of questions in here, and I think I'm mostly satisfied with all these, but maybe the rest of the committee wants to hear him read through these, but
I think
that's my
so. I
question.
think we should ask Administrator Langrick to continue.
Okay.
It's a good document. Go ahead, Clint, please.
Question on capital planning: why aren't there more expenses under the jail? Answer: there are existing desires that do not currently rise to the level of needs. In addition, the department is waiting on decisions for future in the courthouse jail building. We'll continue to occupy and utilize the jail for 15 years or not, kind of becomes the question on how much we want to continue investing in that. Question on the COP grant: can we cut the position and then fill it with a COP grant? Is to be determined. Question: can we add more language to the resolutions to encourage options to seek revenue instead of focus on expenditure reductions? Bottom line is certainly resolutions can be amended to include that, but the intent is to encourage folks to find other types of funding sources. Question: financial planning worksheet: why isn't there any numbers in section 5 regarding health insurance? Answered that above. Question: financial planning worksheet, line 2224. Has to do with our posting requirements yet in the county or in the observer, and we still do require that. Question: are staffing assumptions built off of current funding and authorizations? And the answer is currently funded is what the assumptions are built off of. Question: are there positions in HHS that we're budgeting for and not filling at this point? We can do without. Question yet to be answered: are we accounting for inflation and increased costs? The answer is yes on most. Some items are contracted out for several years and are at fixed price. A reduced cost will not carry inflation increases. Question: are the 20% reduction lines needed? Some of them are completed, some of them are not. This was an attempt to capture an initiative from the strategic planning. We can pull those out if they're extra clutter. Question concerning grants and federal funding. Essentially, if we cut some things, we're going to be obligated to pay for grant monies back. Answer is potentially. This will have to be further investigated. Question: what is the rationale of dropping a daytime patrol officer? Answer: reducing levy expenditures. It's not desirable, and the impacts on our sheriff's office ability to respond. Reduction of a daytime officer versus night is based on the premise that administration supporting administration, cities, villages, and counties may be able to respond with more in the need of mutual aid support. Question: financial planning worksheet. Can we clean out the numbers that are currently not recommended? Answer: I think we should leave them in there with strike through and make sure they don't impact the formulas again, so we don't lose cost of what the price are if we want to reinitiate those. Question: capital improvement program. Why are we not filling in known expenses past 2027? Short answer is I gave guidance to departments to fill out until 2027. As an example, some of the things are going to be a challenge as the price window could get further, but it is part of our strategic plan to eventually arrive at a 10-year capital plan. Question: capital improvements program. Are the projects in the plan are all the projects in the plan must have? Is there a way on the plan to assess or indicate the level of urgency of the projects to be considered? Yes, and we can begin on that for the capital plans. We'll have to make and develop some type of a matrix. I envision working with with rules and strategic planning on trying to devise what a good approach might be to try to evaluate that. Question: budget distribution by departments. Can this be compared to other counties? It's possible. I currently do not know of our comparable counties' budget summaries and reporting capabilities look like, but if desirable, please request for future agenda items for discussion. Question: where is the urgency coming from and why can't we slow down? This is a very appropriate question. The answer: the need for urgency is based on the need to arrive at fiscal solvency. Well, it's a little bit over exaggerated type of a simplicity there, but to put it in context, the 2022 budget is built off of roughly $800,000 of fund balance spending. Operational costs are growing. The identified compensation recommendation goals increases the gap substantially and is in a compounding nature, the biggest increase to the growing gap. If there's a desire to stop the urgency, it can be accomplished with reintroduction of a baseline 2022 budget with discussion on how we're going to fill the approximate existing $800,000 gap. This gap could potentially be filled in 2023 and 2024 with ARPA funds, which you have roughly about 1.6 million currently designated to fill. After this, there may be remaining Pine Valley and highway contingencies to support for several more years. This plan would or could be viewed as a decrease in overall quality of services and would have its added challenges in recruitment, retention, and responding to infrastructure and service support needs. Considerations. First, in the financial planning worksheet, these were items that were put out that I'd like to have your take on today or in the near future. Gas expenditure increases. Why are the estimates so high, or are they too high? And we do have a graphics here at the end that kind of supports that potentially this could be tailored down in future years. Certainly willing to entertain discussion and thoughts on that today. Second one, with efforts to aggressively increase employee compensations in Section 1, should we be considering increasing compensations for board committee members? Very fair thought. Again, looking forward to discussion on that today. Question on why can't we include projections for sales tax increases? Again, we have good consistent data here. I'm okay with it being somewhat conservative, but thoughts that we're being too conservative, which I can't disagree with, we can have discussion on that as well today. Capital improvement program and worksheet, now seeing the extent of the capital projects and the operational challenges, should the county be considering a downsized radio project? Question to be considered. How many referendum questions do we want to ask? If there's any type of guidance on that, we do have a item on your agenda today where if you have expressed thoughts on that, that as a committee you would like to act on or give guidance to your ad hoc committee on Thursday, that would also be advisable. Amendments to the worksheet, I think maybe best to go actually through the worksheet and show the adjustments rather than describing them off of this paper. Big one though, falling with what we'll see with Section 1 on doing an aggregate or a cumulative addition impacts the gaps going forward, which we'll get to. Requests and recommendations from staff. There's a couple. Please be advised the Education Committee on 11 July took action to recommend that the Finance and Personnel Committee that the copper top roof repair project be funded for 2023, and that's to the extent of $100,000 estimated. Ambulance amendment, there is a petition from the director and the Joint Ambulance Committee chair to consider amendments to that directive resolution. There's also recommendations on an amendment to the FAIR resolution for directives. And then there is an adjustment here from the sheriff in response to questions from Supervisor Frank. There was an oversight on the funding of the jail shower project was designated for short-term borrowing versus the jail assessment. So this should free up $10,000 from short-term borrowing. So that is a loose extent of the different actions and talking points and questions to this point, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we ended up with, where were we? We were on number 8, were we not? Or number 7 would be.
We've got items to discuss is if there's changes to the guidance for 2023 budget guidance. We have many talking points yet to go through on the spreadsheet to kind of go through that again to understand what are all the different calculations, what they mean, what levers are available to the committee to adjust on what they see fit. There's discussion yet on the capital improvement plans on how we want to manage that as well.
So how do we want to tackle it? Let's capital improvement plan, program and planning. Let's take that.
Okay, so we've got, you'll see a cover sheet for the capital improvement plans, which is item number, let me find it here. It's in your folder is 06/07. And this is on this document, you'll see at the bottom in terrifically tiny print, The expenditures for 2023 are pulled out from the entire spreadsheet because the entire workbook to capture what we're doing here in 2023. The project cost you'll see running down in the column underneath general obligation debt short-term funding for 92. It tracks down to currently $1,008,700. Now, taking out the $10,000 for the shower jail project that can go against the jail assessment, leaves about $998,700 in anticipated expenses for that. Historically, we've borrowed $1,050,000. The decision points today that I'd like to see you folks discuss is, first off, you have a petition from Finance and Personnel to consider the copper top being added back in. And second discussion point on, are we content yet and feel confident on doing $1,050,000? Do we want to increase that or decrease that, thereby impacting our project plans and getting ready for potentially a borrowing authorization resolution?
If the copper top is added back in, what is the total then?
It's going to add 100,000 back in, so we're going to be at about 198,700. I'm sorry,
$1,098,000.
Yes, $1,098,700. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's take copper top first. Discussion. Motion to add it back to the overall.
Discussion on what's the extent of the roof. So does it have to be $100,000, or is that to make it look the way it is today?
That is an estimate on resurfacing the flat surface.
It's a flat roof,
Yep,
right? It's
yep.
not the peak. The peak's already done with the hail damage, right?
Right.
Major points of interest on the flat roof being over the emergency fire ducts, I believe, where it's rotted and decayed away to the point where you can see daylight coming through, and there's the small kiddie pool that catches water up on the stage.
So if we stay with our current borrowing at $1,050,000, whatever that is, what we've been doing the last 2 or 3 years, why don't we add the copper top back in, but just take out that 48,000 from somewhere else?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have an idea to share with the committee.
Okay. Go ahead.
I attended, along with you and a couple others, orientation at HHS that they did. And I talked to Tricia Clements today, the HHS director, and she said that they would be okay as a department moving the $150,000 HVAC projects from 2023 to 2024, based on they didn't feel that estimate was necessarily a really good one. They'd like to have some professionals come in. And I talked to Supervisor McGuire, and he said he'd be willing to meet with HHS staff since that was his career where he retired. He was an HVAC professional. So if we were to remove the $150,000, if we were to move the $150,000 from 23 to 2024 in the HHS capital budget, we could add back in the campus roof at $100,000, the fair projects at $35,000, the Simons projects, and this is the county share of $26,500, and the parks projects of $20,000 for a total of $181,500. The end result there, if you take out the jail project, would be an increase of $21,500 to the $1,050,000 total. And I don't know if you want to do the fine detail math of adding in a little extra contingency too, but anyway, what I'm saying is by moving that HHS project, we're able to fund all the small departments, their capital projects more or less, and not move the number too much.
Are you making that in the form of a motion?
Yep, I make a motion to amend, or I don't even know if there's been a motion to adopt, so the I guess I'll make a motion to adopt the capital plan as presented first so that we can then start amending it.
I'll second.
Well, we can amend, we're considering it right now, so we can amend it, before we
I'll make
vote
a,
on the entire thing.
okay, I'll make it a motion to amend then to add $180,500 in projects from the small departments. And did you remove the $10,000 projects, Clint, from the jail one already?
It has not been taken out of there, but.
Okay, so that would be a part of my motion to amend to remove the $10,000 jail project. And then also to move the $150,000 for the HHS HVAC from 23 to 24.
And just for clarity on that, to make sure on the same page, we're not going to remove the jail project from planning. We'll just move the funding source to jail assessment.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Taking it off of the Fund 92 category and moving it to another column.
Perfect.
Do we have, all right, you've heard the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Cooey.
Chair, it's time to discussion. I'm
Yes.
Bob and back.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Bob, I'll call on you.
Thank you. So, as for the copper top roof, I just want to make it, no estimates have been done on that yet. It has not been looked at to get cost estimates. It might be less, it might be more. I think that needs to be done, and we'll be meeting here shortly or soon for the education committee. I think that needs to be done right away, so we know what those numbers are. They might be higher, or they might be lower, but unfortunately, it's a vague number, based on another roof at another school that was similar, which I think we need to get much better clarification on that.
Thank you. But maybe a motion would be in order to have, our roof guy take a look at that, Russ Mullins. If he hasn't already, has he, Linda? No.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Mr. Steve,
would the body consider forwarding a motion to the floor? I am unable to do it myself because I'm not a member of the body, to consider engaging Russ Mullen
yeah, well,
for his expertise.
I was going to ask Supervisor Murphy Lopez if he would add that to his amendment. Would you consider that, having?
That's fine.
I don't know, I
Yeah,
don't know the name of Russ's,
STR engineering, I believe.
STR Engineering, yeah.
I'm just not sure where the money comes from for that, so that's why I'm not, I didn't think of that.
Yeah,
I guess, like when I look through this list, I look at Parks projects, Simon's projects. Maybe Tracy can answer this from Simon's, but I think all these are estimates. And then once they're approved to be in the capital program, they go out for bids. And then we get a better idea. Some projects come in, some projects come under. And in the end, we figure out how to sort all this out. So I don't know that any other project has been put out to bid before it's been approved by the county board, but maybe there's a way to get a better estimate. I just don't know how to do that kind of cheaply without starting to spend money.
right.
Becomes a challenge, especially when we're planning projects out quite a ways in advance. Material prices and things like that do change.
Well, we've got an amendment here to the capital projects and capital improvement program, and I think I'll call a question. We'll be here all day if we keep. I'll call a question on the amendment, including the recommendation that STS Engineering look at that roof and give us some more firm figure. But right now, we're going to have to go with the estimate. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, you have an amendment? Now, are we ready to vote on the capital improvement? We're talking about improvement program and planning, are we not? No, so we're not into borrowing yet, so.
No, I think we should tease out the plan, and then if we're content with that number, which I think we're at 100. So
1,198,000, I think, right? Or did that change now?
Mr. Chair, I believe it was 1,098,000. that was being talked about before?
98,000, okay. Mr. Gotchel?
Okay, so this would be a requested increase from the 1,050,000 that we've done in the past. Administrator Langer, can you remind me, is that an evergreen resolution? Are we able to borrow that 1,050,000 every year? Or does that go to county board? That has to go every year, Supervisor Gottschall, to county board on a 3/4 vote for the authorization. And then we do a following up one, just like we'll do with the bonding, where then we'll do an actual put it out to sale resolution. Procedurally, this is going to look and feel similar to how we've done it in the past. Yes. We're not pursuing an increase. It'll be an increased dollar value, or a small. But not specifically that. I mean, that's not what we're asking the county board. We're asking the county board to approve the spending in general, like we've done every year. Yes, there's kind of the two parts is the plan on, what projects do you want to take on? The next action and then is going to be recommend a resolution to the county board authorizing borrowing up to this much in 1,098,000 in short-term notes. And then we'll be working with municipal advisor to put that resolution language together.
Mr. Chair, can I clarify something on the dollar amount? Because
Go
there's
ahead.
several dollar amounts thrown out now.
Yep.
So the $1,098,000 figure that Mr. Turk was referring to, that was before we made the amendment. Mr. Langrick had mentioned something about the jail project being moved off of the short-term borrowing column to give us 998,000, and then he was adding the $100,000 roof back in. But with the amendments we just made, the total would be $1,030,000, $30,200. That's the base amount without contingency.
Okay.
And then if you take that times 4%, the 4% contingency would be 41,208. And then if you add those two numbers, the base and the contingency, you get $1,071,408. So maybe I'm missing something, but that was just the math I just did in my notebook here.
Right, and but we haven't, I guess I would say we don't have a firm figure yet to go, but the borrowing is going to be very similar to what we've done in the past. We're trying to ballpark that and get it as close as we can right now. So we have some direction as to capital improvement. Okay, so we have the amendment, we approve that. So are you ready? We'll vote on the entire capital improvement program and planning. All those in favor of the program and planning signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we have that done. Now, did you want then a motion on borrowing then as well, Clint? I suppose that's necessary.
It would help shape it. We have until September before we put a resolution together, but the earlier we decide on a number, the more time we'll have to work with our municipal advisor and getting the language put together.
So what number are we proposing right now for our borrowing?
So this is where I have, if we're going to talk, we're talking referendum too. Now, if we go and raise the capital borrowing and then we're going for referendum at the same time, people have already adjusted to the 1,050,000, right? Agree with it, disagree with it, whatever, but they've adjusted to that. Now, if we go and hit them up for another 40,000-50,000, doesn't sound like a lot, but now you're hitting them again. I mean, they've already adjusted to that. I think that we should be able to find 40 or 50,000, whether it comes out of highway or comes out of somewhere, to leave it the same as it already has been the last few years, and just continue to go with that process and work through it. I do not encourage increasing that capital borrow.
Okay. Anyone else? I guess I thought in the prior discussion, we were going to find $48,000 in delayed replacement of air handling systems at HHS.
Well,
Did I miss that somehow?
well, I think we took the 50 out and then we added 180 back in and we ended up somewhere between 30 and $50,000. That's more than we normally borrow,
Mhm.
I would say.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, my figure is 21,408.
all right.
That's what we're over the.
Whatever the number is. But what I'm saying is I think we could pretty easily come out. I mean, $21,000 to highway, I hate to say it, it doesn't even add up to a half a mile of seal coat, so.
Right. Mr. Cooley, why don't you make a motion
Okay.
that we do capital improvement borrowing at prior years' amounts?
I would, that's the motion I would entertain to make is that
Okay,
we stay at the same borrowing we've done in the past 2 years.
and Manning seconding that motion, I assume. Okay. All right, so we're gonna stick to our borrowing of the prior 2 years, same amount. I think that's 1,050,000, I believe. All those in favor of
Mr.
that?
Chair,
Yes, go
can we
ahead.
just clarify where that money is coming from so it's clear what the committee wants?
Capital borrowing,
Where is the 20,000 and change coming from?
we don't know. We don't know yet.
Well, he said highway. Can
I'll
we?
take it out of highway. That's where I
Okay.
would take it from. That's the biggest
Just,
chunk of it.
you just made 21,000. Congratulations. I guess so. There's a lot of places it could come from. All right, let's vote on the 1,050,000. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We have it. Thank you. Discussion and possible action on the financial planning worksheet.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I think it may be beneficial to go through the worksheet again, top to bottom, if you're comfortable with that, to kind of explain what we're trying to visualize with it. And there has been several different changes made to the document. As again, it is a worksheet.
And where is it in our materials here?
This is going to be item number 08A, Financial Planning Decision Worksheet. And then you'll see a date change on the top of its 26 July. So I've made several changes on here, several discussion points to kind of have as we go along in broad strokes again. So remember our section 1, we're trying to capture assumptions on salaries and wages and our benefits. In section 2, we're trying to capture forecasts for impacts on our revenue flows and and some of our organizational revenues that we kind of see our use of fund balance that we used as a revenue in previous years. As we get into section 3, then it's our overall gap based on those assumptions. Section 4 is changes in the departments. Section 5 is a section for health insurance adjustments when we get our plan back and if we want to modify a plan different from the assumptions. Section number 6 is some of our other resources and additional financial adjustments that we can consider. And then when you get down to section 7, and then it's the overall gap. Now, biggest change to this that has happened now since June 22nd is I have talked with some accounting minds that are much more firmer accounting minds than my own, which I say with an apology and sheepishly. And in capturing the wages and benefits, in order to keep it a consistent, is based on a 2022. Remember, we're trying to set up our years of a baseline 2022 budget, which we're currently at, of which we know we have about an $800,000 gap. We're trying to show that projection going out into the future years of 2023, 2024, 2025, so on. The wages and benefits that were put in here were a one-year add-on and were not cumulative, and that's on my ignorance, and I do apologize for that. The numbers, though, are left as an added 1 year on, and I've added a column or a line C-9 that you'll see up in section 1 that shows the cumulative impact on those. As we add wages and benefits, that is a cumulative impactor, so we should visualize it pushing the ceiling up. So that ticks up from an estimate with the plans and goals in place right now. It's a 1,037,000. Adding the next year's potential impacts of recommended in here of a step increase, a one-step increase at 2% and potentially another CPI or cost of living increase of 5% is a 7%, adds 880,000. The next year of adding a step increase in a 4% CPI equates to 829,000, and then tailors down as we hit the top of our Carlson-Detman study, and then the anticipation that hopefully our cost of living in the economy is stabilizes. Those significantly impact, though, the projections going forward into future years for our total gap at the bottom, because it's now a cumulative impact and not a year-to-year impact. Likewise, an adjustment that I still have to make, and this doesn't balance it out by any means, but in discussion also with some auditing minds more clever than myself, in line number F of section 4, we do have listed in there, I'm sorry, of section 2, F of section 2, you'll see that there's the increased levy limit from net new construction. We're anticipating that it's going to creep up in the next year 20,000, the next year 25,000. Likewise, that should also be a compounding number, of which I will be changing after this meeting. Two different types of scenarios, though. When we're talking with wages, we're talking about increases by the hundreds of thousands. Our net new construction of tens of thousands, of course, isn't going to make up the difference of it. So we're going to arrive at more anticipated gap, stretching out past 2023. Some of the other changes that you'll see on here is I cleaned up some of the language that was in the report on the different items that went through. Other impacts in working with Clerk Kalish, anticipated revenues on pushing out election items was tailored down from a potential 50,000 to a $7,500. There was, where are my other adjustments here? Those are kind of the big ones, but and then it was asked too to understand if the recommendations from the directive resolutions were put into the planning. So those I tried to bring out with the red text showing where they are impacted in this plan. And then I added a section at the bottom, right above section 7, with the resolution language and the directives in there showing as a cost impact differentials at the very bottom. So with items being in place right now and best guesstimates that we have, and we're looking at a 2023 with a guidance in place of arriving at about $120,000 of capacity, meaning that we're beyond gap, but that's with about $1.3 million in ARPA funds supplementing this year. Going forward into the following year with $330,000 of ARPA funds, but with the current proposed expenditures, we're going to be at $700,000. Going forward then with no ARPA funds and compounding impacts, we're at 2.3 off to 2.8 gap, and then 3.8 gaps to fill, again, based on a 2020-2022 budget. So that is where we're currently at. Some of the major pieces to consider for you today is, again, first and foremost on what you would like to do at 2023. You do have capacities here to fill and to amend and to adjust. And that's where I'd like to see most of the conversation focused on is 2023. And as we start looking though forward into the future years, that would also be the most helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Melissa.
Yes, Melissa.
I would like to talk about the assumptions that were made in building the 2023 budget. Is now the time to have that conversation?
So you, Melissa, you'd like to move down into,
I just want to talk about the numbers that essentially his assumptions that when he was building the budget, the assumptions that he made.
okay, I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so so my first question is, and I think this is for both the county administrator and the strategic planning, rules and strategic planning standing committee. Have you gone through the strategic plan and work plan to determine the priority of items? Because many times as we went through the process of creating our strategic plan, there was the assumption that we were going to look at the financial impacts of each of our strategic goals and then look at the plan as a whole and come up with the priorities. And to me, it looks like somehow in the last 6 months, it was decided that the wage study and getting our wages up to the wage study became the top and almost only priority. Other than, look, our resolutions are attempting to get at us looking at our services as a whole are non-mandated versus mandated discretionary, however you want to phrase it. There are some other pieces that we are picking in, but from a financial aspect, we have essentially chosen that our wages are more important than anything else. And we have, and I think Supervisor Murphy Lopez said this last time, but I'm going to say it again. We did a 7% raise last year. This is proposing a 9% total raise this year, 7% next year, 6% the next year, 3% the next year, 3% the next year. That's 35% in wage increases in 6 years. And as much as I think our employees are amazing and deserve every penny we can give them, I really have a hard time with a 9% raise this year when we're talking about decimating all of our services, which I think we have to have those conversations. I think those conversations are very important. We do need to evaluate our services. I think there are ways that we should be cutting, but when you're compiling that issue with trying to accommodate a 9% raise after a 7% raise last year, I think it merits more conversation. I mean, for example, because we are giving these wage increases, we're creating a situation where we are not only not meeting some of the goals we stated in the plan, but we're doing the exact opposite of what we said we were going to do. For example, one of our strategic goals is to continue to invest in community and economic development partnerships with a demonstrated return on investment. I think, trying to push economic development off the county levy probably goes against that goal in certain aspects. And then another one is capitalize on the county's natural beauty and recreational opportunities through the investment and marketing of county parks, campgrounds, and recreational opportunities. The resolution clearly, is wording otherwise, that we are not investing and we are divesting ourselves. So I guess I would like to see more balance in attaining our wage study goals while still at least being able to focus on some of our other goals in the strategic plan. Thank you.
Anyone else? Since I don't know, we jumped ahead, or we appropriately are discussing the things that went into the planning. Anyone else want to weigh in on this, on the committee, and other board members as well? I'll entertain.
I mean, I would go ahead and make a motion, although I am open to input as to what exactly the percentage should be. But I'd be willing to make a motion that we would change the language in our instructions to our departments that the wage increases would be either the wage study increase or the cost of living increase, or it could be just half, like 4.5% or whatever. But if you want that in a motion, I would make that, and then we can see if anyone will second it and go from there.
Okay, so to be clear, what are you?
So I would make a motion.
Cut it in half or adjust it to inflation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to discussion on the exact level, but I will start with, let's just start with saying a 4.5% increase instead of 9% increase.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Murphy Lopez seconds. Okay, discussion.
Yeah, discussion. So my question would be is there's two different things here, right? There's like your cost of living, which you would get, and then there's the part where people are not at the step that they should be at. Now, what's the difference between, so take the cost of living out and say we've got 100 people that are supposed to be at step 8 and they're at step 6. What's that cost? Because I think if you look, if you went to the employees, and I'm just guessing, but I think if I've been told I was going to be at a step 8 from a wage study that was done 6, 8, 10 years ago, whenever it was done, and I'm still not at that step 8, wouldn't it make more sense to get to the step 8 level? I don't know what the difference is, I guess is what I'm asking, Clinton, and I don't know if you can answer that or not, but my question would be is what does it cost to get everybody at the step they're supposed to be at? And then by doing that, is the cost of living part, you know what I mean? Is that needed? Does that equal 4.5% that Melissa just said?
I can. So there's two elements to it. One is we're trying to, the study came back in 2018, said market value we established at a step 8, and we've been trying to progress towards there. And those are about 2% for each step, roughly. So we're trying to say that in 2018, if you've been here and you're proficient in your job, you should be at like a step 8 at so many types of years. You can move along that, but at the same time, if we're not taking that entire schedule and then kind of adding a cost of living expense to that, it's sliding backwards. So then if we're reaching step 8, but we haven't considered a cost of living or CPI or whatever type of a increase to that, then when we've reached step 8 now in 2023, 2024, but our step 8 was really reflected on wages back from 2018, then that argument still remains in place because we haven't kind of kept up with cost of living on top of that wages, that schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I understand that. The point, I guess the point I'd make is if when we looked at how often people got raises in the past 12 years, I would say there was 6 or 7 years where there was no raise at all, right? At least. And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying, but we have to try to make a balance of budget here at the same time, and you can't not balance a budget and pay. You know what I mean? That's the dilemma we're in, right? I mean, we can raise all the wages, but then we can't balance the budget. So then we got to get rid of the services. So then what did you gain? I guess is where the tightrope is. And it's for us to figure it out, right? I get that, but.
And I'll make a comment. The other side of that, or the third of that, or whatever, is you're losing employees because they can't work for what we're paying them, or they find it more attractive to go to another county or another service or go to Madison and work. So we do have a crisis there. It's the era of resignation, and we're a prime example of that in the county.
I would agree with that, Marty. But on the same token, we had a survey. In the survey, what was the top 2 things or 3 things? I think the wage was actually like third. I think there was benefits, that health insurance was pretty high on that survey. And the management that they were working for was pretty high on that survey, if I remember right.
That's true.
I could be wrong.
No, you're right. I believe that is true. Anyone else recall that?
So I mean, in that, we're not looking at our problem of if we're talking about wages going to fix it, retaining employees, I don't necessarily agree with that. Because the survey doesn't tell you that. Now, how good is the survey? How much is it? Who was surveyed? So on and so forth. But I'd be really careful just throwing money. Part of the reason why I say this is I work in industry in the town, and we can throw money all we want. We don't have any more people applying. So money isn't the fix. I mean, we just keep throwing more money, and we don't get any more people.
Frank, you had a comment?
Yeah, so I appreciate Melissa's comments and the comments going on here. I also want to remember that the county did give I believe 7% raise to elected officials this last year. So I think that may be something we have to figure into. How does that look? How does that work? Just food for thought.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just to build on Mr. Kui's comments, experience I'm having as a manager in my company, I would say that yes, he is correct that just increasing compensation alone is not enough to necessarily attract people, but I will also say the failure to do it is enough to drive people away.
Okay. Everyone get that? Doing it doesn't attract people, but not doing it sometimes drives, what? No, it's the opposite of that, wasn't it? Anyway, money isn't the only thing. Mr. Seep.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I hate to interrupt the committee's business, but with regard, I believe, to Mr. Frank's comment about the percentage of raise for the elected officials, it's, I think, noteworthy that their wages can be only adjusted once for their 4-year term. So you're really spreading that, whatever the percentage was, over a period of 4 years. They can't be adjusted in the term they're serving. They're adjusted for the succeeding term of 4 years, and that's it. They can't get raises every year after that. It's a 4-year raise. So it's a little confusing to say they got a 7% raise last year They didn't get it for the year, they got it for 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I read from that? So
You may.
we're on the same page here.
Mr. Murphy Lopez, go ahead.
So this was just for 3 elected positions where we adopted wage increases back in March. And that was the sheriff, the clerk of circuit court, and the coroner. So the coroner, there was no percent raise established. It was only per month, per call, per cremation salary. For the sheriff and clerk of circuit court, it was a 7% raise for 2023, 7% for 2024, a 4% for 2025, and a 3% for 2026. And this did not apply to the treasurer, the clerk, or the register of deeds.
Thank you.
I just want to say too that I think that I seconded Melissa's motion because it's just, we're trying to do too much, and, you know, you also got to think about the residents, you know, and if we cut all those things, what's going to happen to our residential population, you know? So I think going with step increases is probably the better way to go. I think having the COLA increases in there too is just we can't do it all. It's just look at the figure for 2027. $3 million. I mean, we can't ask the voters for a referendum for $3 million. There's no way. So how can we get those wage increases? It's just too far. People don't only live here for the money. You know, they live here for other things too. So they work here for other things.
So may I ask, Melissa, your motion to cut, do you know how much in millions of dollars that represents? And
I do not, I did not do the math. I mean,
Okay.
presumably it would be half as much.
Could be half as much. Yeah. So you're looking at a reduction from 1,037,000 to roughly 518 or so.
518,000 versus 1 point whatever. Yeah. So it's
and
significant. I mean, it's a significant part
using
of
the
our.
compounding factor,
Yes,
then it would be.
it's like other industries, it's going to remain the major slice of your
Right.
budgetary expenses.
And I just want to say again, I wish that I would love to be able to give a 9% raise and they're worth it, but it's just such a bigger picture that we have to consider. And so.
If I can, and I appreciate, and let me apologize if I'm missing the expectations from previous discussions. And I know that context is certainly changed now when we're bringing everything up onto the table and we're making things more enlightened. So in bringing the proposal forward, it was based on kind of 2 elements. The first one being on discussions that we had from previous budget. We did advance like Pine Valley. We pushed another step out there, trying to catch up with them, trying to make advancements yet on the Carlson study. The added cost of living increase is kind of coming from a CPI through Wisconsin Employee Relations Commission, in which they push out baseline or base wage bargaining negotiations, which show that it's trending up. It's at about a 7% right now for contracts in January. United States Treasury is showing a CPI, or not Treasury, but financial folks are showing a CPI of about a 9.1%. So we know that overall there's going to be inflationary factors. That's where that's coming from. So I can appreciate too, like Supervisor Luck is saying, we're going to have conflicts and values here. And if it was over, one bunching against the other is exactly the conversations we have to be having. So I appreciate Supervisor Luck bringing up the other talking points on the other values brought forward from the strategic plan.
Mr. Chair, one more comment.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
just want to reiterate that I'm still in favor of the resolutions that are amended. I think they could use some amendments, but because I do think that we need to have those conversations and we need to make sure that the committees have very clear instructions about expectations and to make sure that they're considering all scenarios. So I'm still very much in favor of making cuts and doing other things. Well, I shouldn't phrase it that way, that I'm in favor, but I mean, I know that we need to have those discussions and they're very important. We're setting ourselves up for just such a huge gap going forward if we try to take on these huge raises all at once.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Can we restate the motion, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Cheryl, do you have the words? If you would, please. Yes, please.
Motion is to reduce in the, what was the document you were calling that? The assumption.
The financial planning decision
Planning
worksheet.
decision worksheet, the assumption that was made that the wage increases would be 4% for the wage study and 5% for cost of living. I'm amending that to say that it will be a 4.5% increase in total, or half the proposed amount.
Okay. And do you agree with that? Second? Mr. Murphy Lopez, is that what you seconded?
I wonder, so you're just talking about 23 and not 4, 5, 6, and 7?
So this is his budget instruction to the departments for this particular year. I think that we will have to have the conversation about subsequent years, but I don't know that we need to have that right now.
Fine with me.
Okay. Do you have a comment to add to this department head, Pine Valley? Grab a mic and feel free, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Pine Valley is going to be able to fund its entire wage increase, so there wouldn't be any additional cost to the county there. And ours is going to be different from the rest of the county. The rest of the county is getting 9%, Pine Valley only 7%. We're only moving one step. So I'm confused as to how this would affect Pine Valley. It's talked about to be 4.5%. No, it's going to be 4.5%. I'm not sure what the intent would be for Pine Valley to do. Move the step would be 2.1%. I just raise that. I don't want to defend the initial person.
Right. Any response to that, you two? Did you consider Pine Valley when you made?
I think it would be 4.5% for highway and everyone else except Pine Valley, and that would be 3.5% according to the motion to amend.
Okay, 4.5 and then 3.5 for Pine Valley. Okay.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Gotchel.
Just a comment. I guess I can get behind reducing this, much to my chagrin, but are we driving towards something? We're just cutting it in half and saying because we can't afford, I'm not like laying in tension with anybody that made the motion, but we're just taking the amount saying it's too high and we're cutting it in half. I would be more comfortable saying we're driving towards increasing 2 steps or something like that. It seems like we have more direction, other than we just can't afford it this year.
Mr. Chair, can I just make one comment?
Yes, please, Ms. Luck.
So even though I was saying it was focused on this year in particular, what I'm hugely concerned about is when you look at the compounding effect of these raises in 2024, 2025. I mean, we're talking 2.8 million, or what was the number it's a huge number that the salaries alone will impact our gap in what our tax levy is versus, what our operational costs are. So that I am thinking long-term, I just didn't want to have the conversation about all the subsequent years in this, because this particular motion has to do with our administrator's instructions to department staff and also in building his budget for 2023. So, and if we don't use all of the ARPA money this year, because we have this $500,000, that also gives us the opportunity to use ARPA funds in subsequent years while we figure out how we overall run the county and what services we decide to provide or not provide. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can make one comment, Mr. Chair. So
Yes.
if the course we go on I appreciate that and I get that because there's a lot of things that are on the table at one time. But I think and I'm not an economist. I don't know what the economy is going to have. The projections going into the future years are also built maybe too conservative and sheepish on my end of still trying to guess what the cost of living increases are going to be. If it's going to stay at a CPI of a 7%, if it's, and how quick that's going to trickle down. I mean, overall, on a broad strokes on things, though, I want to just kind of keep on a broad vision that, we've kind of arrived here at a point of not engaging in wage increases from back to almost like an Act 10 type of a time frame. We moved forward with a 7% increase going forward into this year using debt funding, using contingency funding, and we used Pine Valley funding, and we used some other sources to try to close that, to try to make that initial gap. I mean, the reality that we're at as a county here is that things are only going to cost more, and we're unable to raise levy by our formula without some type of referendum, which we all know. So if we don't make up for it this year, we have to hope then that somehow the economy comes back to us. Otherwise, we're going to be kind of stuck with the same type of situations where our employees are going to have less consumption power and being asked to do the same or potentially more because we're going to have the same level of expectations of services. So thank you.
Okay. While we're at it, were there any other recommendations or suggestions that went into the planning that we want to talk about? I know we have a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chair, I have one, well, actually, Supervisor Murphy-Lopez, do you want to talk about? I was just, part of the thinking behind, if we didn't give all the raises, it would give us more time to look at staffing and the staffing cuts that were proposed as well. Supervisor Murphy-Lopez, did you want?
Yeah, staffing
on it?
numbers. I know that we were trying to get an idea on staffing numbers, and I don't know if we have that information yet. That's enough to make decisions on. Go ahead.
I don't have, I've been asked at the last meeting to produce a staffing study on that. I'm
I
still,
think we're specifically thinking about the staffing changes you are recommending in your assumptions document.
okay.
Mr. Chair, can we vote on the motion and then go to a new topic? Because I think it's going to get too confusing.
We
if
can, yeah. So the motion was reducing from 9 to 4.5, basically, combining cost of living and step in, well, whatever, the move in the Carlson Detman.
9 to 4.5 for highway and general, 7 to 3.5 for Pine Valley.
Pine Valley. Yep. Everyone ready to vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Do a roll call, please.
We can
Thank you.
do a roll call. Cheryl, do you have the numbers there, the names?
Murphy Lopez. Marty Brewer.
Aye.
Luck.
Aye.
Manning. Gotchel.
Roll.
Turk.
No.
Hui.
Aye.
You have 5 ayes, 2 noes.
So the motion carries. Okay. Anything else now on the assumptions?
Mr. Chair, can I make, whether it's the guidance letter or the financial planning worksheet, it's in both places. I just have one.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so with the 2 positions, one is full-time, the other is a part-time position that are recommended for cuts for the 2023 budget. One is in the sheriff's office. It's a reduced daytime patrol position, and the other is in the veterans office. That's a part-time benefit specialist position. I believe that, and I think Supervisor Luck was kind of alluding to this with the strategic plan. We talked about when we make cuts, we want to evaluate staffing levels. Am I getting that right? And I think part of that evaluation is looking at what those neighboring counties or peer counties have for staffing levels. And I think it's a little premature myself to put those positions in the 23 budget. I think maybe in the 24 budget that maybe will have to happen, but I think we need more research and study on that. So I'd like to make a motion to amend to restore both of those positions in the financial planning worksheet for 2023.
Okay, we have a motion to restore the road patrol officer and veteran service assistant. Does anyone second that motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Cooey. Discussion? Anybody?
Mr. Chair, I will just quickly comment that I do think that it is a little premature. I think that in the end, we are going to end up cutting services and positions in our county. But I feel like it should be a holistic and systematic approach and not, I don't know how we got to those two positions as far as cutting them this year, but it just feels like it's a little early for that. And we can make that decision over the next year. And that's part of the discussions we'll be having when these things come to committee, when and if the resolutions come to committee.
Yeah. Yes, if we can move the resolutions for committee discussion and interpretation and review, then these can certainly be topics that can be added in those discussions. Are you ready to vote on that recommendation, that motion? That's road patrol and veteran services. Shall we have roll call on this? Yes, please.
Okay, to restore the sheriff's department and the half-time veterans person, Marty Brewer.
We're restoring it, right? Yes.
Yes, to restore. Melissa Luck. Manning. Gotcha.
Aye.
Turk.
Aye.
Cooey.
I
Murphy Lopez.
Oh,
All voting in favor.
Oh, great. Didn't need a roll call. All right. Anything else?
Can I make one more comment? I know I've been chatty today, sorry. I just want to say that I really do appreciate the administrator's work on this. It's a lot, and you've done a good job of helping us wade our way through all of this information. So I do appreciate it. I know you feel like we're picking it apart all the time, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the hard work that's being done by you and your staff.
Oh, thank you. It's a lot of efforts beyond my staff with departments as well and supporting committees. And we're arriving at where we wanted to be at, was where the information is at your folks' convenience to be able to make some decisions. So welcome.
Thank you. Okay, anything else?
Yeah,
All right.
just one question on our
Yes.
benefits, health benefits. Where are we at with that?
We have three options that we're exploring. We're working with Wallace Cooper Elliott on different benefit package adjustments to see if we can put together a plan that offers benefits with consideration to employee impacts, but still has consideration for financials. Second item is we do have our numbers submitted off to the actuarials that work for the ETF, for the Employee Trust Fund. They run the actuarial works just to establish if we have a premium and what that premium amount looks like for costing. We have to have our resolution into ETF, I believe, by September, October, if we're going to enter into that going forward into January. So we have to make that decision point in the next 2 months or so. Third option is being explored with another option. That is, we haven't established contact yet with the actual attorneys and the folks that are making it. But we're hoping to get another costing from a third option as well.
So we're hoping to get something back from that employee trust thing
To make a decision yet for 2023.
so that we could go to that ETF again if
Yes,
it made sense.
that's the intentions. Yes. Yep.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Murphy.
The worksheet. So I do appreciate all the changes you made to it since last time. I think that getting those final numbers in section 7 correct is really going to help us with getting especially those resolutions out to the big committees and for the ad hoc referendum committee. Because we got to know what are the dollar amounts we're working with here. I know that you probably can't amend that right now, but I think that was probably my biggest concern with the worksheet in its previous state is that I wasn't sure section 7 was right. And those numbers have changed pretty dramatically. And then we just made a motion to amend that will change it further. So I think my question is, how sure are you on those numbers in section 7 at this point? And when can we get to a more numbers that we're more confident in? I was very confused by the cumulative versus non before. I think I understand what you've done now. I just want to make sure, are we sure we're not missing any other rows that should be cumulative but aren't? That's one of my worries right now.
Yes, and I can appreciate that. No, we're constantly reviewing it. This entails a good share of my day and trying to tease it out. Working with other counties as well as asking, what do you think about this? And then they look at me goofy like, we've never done this before kind of a thing, but then they try to follow through. It comes down to identifying what the line item is and really trying to visualize if that's a cumulative impactor or if that's like a one-time in that year impactor to know if it's going to carry on. So like the two examples of ensuring that wages are a cumulative impactor because you're assuming that you're going to have that much, you're not going to reduce from it, you're only going to continue add to it, gets compounded versus if you have if we're going to put in a new AS400 system and we know we have implementation cost in 2024, but then we're only doing licensing in the years following, that it's only impacting those 1 years. Same thing with revenue flows. Discussion with debates on, well, is sales tax, should that be a cumulative one or should that be a single year impactor? And it's kind of arrived at where, again, you're kind of guessing, but the best practice would be to keep that as an individual year impactor, as that might fluctuate more versus like a net new construction where you're anticipating that your net new construction, your overall equalized value of your property is going to continue to go up, if not by inflationary factors on the cost of the dollar kind of a thing. So we're going to continue teasing those out. Again, I want to caution on this worksheet that we're going to get to a spot where it's ever going to be complete because obviously we're still waiting for health insurances to come in. There could be changes. We can be getting better estimates. Our estimates might change. So in using it for a referendum, I think that you can use it as a target point to look at again for understanding the big projections of it. But as you enter a referendum, I think those numbers are going to have to be pulled directly from a department type of a perspective again to cost what that is. The other factor that you have to consider though too is the assumptions that are still built on here now. We've changed 2023 on wages, but I'm still recommending 5% cost of living increase yet for 2024 and years subsequent. Now, if the economy slows down a lot, then maybe that makes sense. But if we're not addressing that, or if we don't change that assumptions, that's still going to impact your number. So so the other part of it too is with a referendum, how many years do you want to reach out with your referendum question? Is it going to be 1 year? Let's see how it works. Is it going to be multiple years where we have to get that more tuned down? And is it for all the services, or is it going to be for specific departments or function services? And then to make it more complicated, do you want to include in some of the capital projects in a referendum question versus short-term note borrowing types of elements? So not to dance around it, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just think that we got to have numbers from somewhere for a referendum. This is where we're going to get them. And so maybe, I'm not quite sure I'm following about getting them from departments, but we have to have somewhat solid numbers to go off of. And so I just want to make sure that we've double checked and we've had other people look. It sounds like you had the auditor look at this worksheet. I just want to make sure these numbers are right. And, you know, we're kind of, if we don't further amend this, we're kind of committing to this 5% raise for the next year, for 2024. And I just want to make sure that we are, you know, we're solid on that. Like we want to do that, because that's going to affect everything else. It's going to affect what we cut. It's going to affect what we ask the voters for in a referendum. So if we ask for if we give too high of a wage increase and the public perceives that that's too much, they might vote the referendum down because of that. So I just think we have to be really careful here about this worksheet, just to make sure that before we dive into all these resolutions, that's really the worksheet we want. You know, we're comfortable with those numbers. That's my concern.
Yes, and to just make sure, you know, we're going past of just the number on here, is the assumptions in place that to arrive at those numbers also have to be agreed upon. So, yes.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
we need numbers. Where's that put us on our agenda here today? Seems like we've skipped around a little bit.
I think we've addressed the capital improvement plan. We've touched on changes to the budget guidance based on discussion with the financial planning worksheet. Changes will be made from the next meeting. Takes us down to 9, Mr. Chair, discussion and possible action requested on financial reports, staffing, wage reports, and mandated versus non-mandated service reports.
Right. So number 9. And do we have, what is the accompanying exhibit that we should be looking at for number 9?
In your folder, there's several different items. One, the first one being a wage comparison. There's multiple different sheets in there that was done. This is in attempting to satisfy requests from previous meeting on having a wage study. From comparables, we used same types of comparables in a recent study through finance and personnel. The different positions that were discussed were ones in which we thought might have the same comparable types of job descriptions. We have in there child support position, a CNA position, a deputy county clerk position, deputy sheriff, GIS technician, a couple from health and human services, highway operator patrolman, land conservation technician were the ones that we have in there. And again, I think these were brought into context of trying to identify if we still have confidence in our wage schedule and where we're at in our wages. This was prepared through my office through Assistant Dull, and they are there for your review if you have questions, concerns, or considerations.
Thank you, Clint. Cheryl, you were identified as preparing these. Could you give us a little thumbnail discussion of these?
So,
Maybe taking one at a time, you know, or. So, which one?
okay. Hello. Hello.
I don't think you're on.
Do you want to move over here, Sharon?
Hello. There we go. Okay. Child support, I think, was pretty easy. I hope, although, you know, what the name looks like on the job schedule, and when you get a hold of the job description, it could be two different things, but most of them were called child support specialist. Ashland County is currently in the middle of a wage study, so what we would get from them would be old. Crawford County did not respond, nor did Sawyer. And some of those that have the mid missing, it's because on their wage schedule, they just give the high and the low. So if there's no questions with child support, Pine Valley was kind of tough. There's very few that have CNAs. The county clerk, we did a deputy. Of course, again, job descriptions are going to be different, but these are mostly called deputy county clerk. So that was pretty easy. Ours does have the accounts payable. None of them mentioned that in that description, so that could be different across the counties. Sheriff's Department, I did have some data for deputies, but of course they're union contracts, so that's gonna, those were a little difficult to get as well. With the zoning department, we tried to go with GIS because that's kind of a specialty in itself, although some departments, especially like Richland, is combined with sanitation. But so you'll see some different job titles there that include other things, and that could vary probably because of the other things in the job description that we don't know about. Health and Human Services, we did the director. Most directors at Health and Human Services generally are the same. So we did those starting. There's some with, again, with the mid is missing because they just do the maximum and minimum. We also did disability benefit specialists because those are semi-consistent across the counties. And then we did the elderly benefit specialists because those are semi-consistent across the counties, and then we tried to bring in county health officers. This was a little tougher because some titles do not say they're the county health officer. So you just, when you can't find that title, you have to assume it could be the public health nurse.
That's not Rose's. Rose has a separate, other than public health nurse. She has a separate classification.
I don't think it's on the job schedule defined though. Highway was, it's called equipment operator or patrolman. Green Lake just called a general laborer, and then the next position up was like a shed foreman. So we are assuming maybe with the general laborer, they may get general laborer pay, and then when they operate a machine, they may get a differential. Land conservation, a good opportunity to do the land and water tech. Most of them are called conservation techs without looking at their job description. We just are going with the general conservation technician title.
Okay, and that takes us through our wage study. Second document that we have in here. I'll maybe skip one here. We'll go to 09J is a revised version of our department appropriations of levy that it's in there. It has it broken down into 2021 and 2022. These are not actuals on expenditure for 2021. They are what's in the budget, and likewise through 2022, it's what's in the budgeted amount. I don't know if you want to have a discussion on these. Otherwise, then I would pass it to Supervisor Murphy Lopez and Supervisor Luck for the mandated versus non-mandated report that was also added to your folder.
Okay, thank you. Sean and Melissa, are you ready? Take it away.
It's really for informational purposes only. I just feel like that it's for the supervisors to educate themselves as to what the statutes actually say and not for us to go point by point. But Supervisor Murphy Lopez, if you have any comments.
We tried to keep it simple because there's so much statutory language out there. But, we have a department or service in the first column. Supervisor.
What exhibit are we looking at here?
This is 09K. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Yeah, so there's 8 pages here, and if you go to the first page, the titles are on the first page. There's a department or a service. Supervisor Frank called me and said, "What is 911 outlay?" And I said it probably should just be 911. That was just a carryover from the spreadsheet that Melissa had started with the budget.
Because, yeah, it was taken directly from the budget worksheet that we got from Clint.
Yeah, so if the committee accepts our report today, just know that we would like to just remove that word outlay from 911 because it's not quite accurate. But otherwise, the rest of the column is just intended to capture different departments and services. The second column is just intended to summarize so that you could quickly look and see what department and service was mandated and which wasn't. And sometimes we added a few very brief notes. A common one is, yes, it's mandated, but the level of staffing is not. And then the law is in the third column, almost always Wisconsin statute, but there's few exceptions. And then the actual language is in the fourth column. It's in italics. And then we have summary notes or notes from staff in the fifth column. So sent this out to department heads, and I think there were about 7 or 8 responses from department heads. And so we added additional either statutory language or notes from them.
I will make one further clarification. So the categories that we have in that column A come directly from, it's called it's in our financial planning documents folder. It's the revised levy by department. So all of these, each row is a line item from what services are covered by tax levy specifically. So this is not every service we provide because we provide many services that do not draw from the tax levy. So this list was created focusing specifically on each category that gets money from the tax levy.
Chair, you have a moment?
Go ahead, Mr. Frank.
Thank you. I want to thank you for putting this document together. I can think of about 70 other counties that want this, and I think this should go to Wisconsin counties. I think a copy of this should go. I think the reference of it, the work behind it, and the statutes, the follow-up on it is wonderful. It's excellent. I did make the comment about the 911 outlay, and I'm understanding that is actually because that is an account that was put in there as an account. And when I looked at it, I saw the heading department or service, and that was where my confusion was. So now it is a funded account. That said, in going through this list, certainly not a list that I want to sit and fall asleep with because there's a lot of good activity to see in this. Many of the services are not mandated, but once you kick them in a county, you have requirements that you have to meet, that you have to do. And I think that's really important. 911 could be one of those. The ambulance is one of those. Once you choose to do that in your county, then the state statutes kick in and say, you're doing this, you have to follow the rest of these. So I think that's an important piece of that decision-making process. So thank you for this document.
Thank you. So if in a few words you could summarize what you found here, can you do that? Are we doing the things that we're mandated to do? Do we do too much? Are we doing too little? Can we cut back on some of these things? I guess that would be my question.
Mr. Chair, I think that state gives us a fair amount of flexibility with staffing levels. It's very rare for them to set minimum staffing levels. If you want to get into the weeds, you can do it by reading this document because there are some exceptions to that.
Sure.
But I think that's my main takeaway from this. Yes, they require you to, for example, provide drug and alcohol counseling to your residents. How much? It doesn't say. It says you have to prioritize pregnant women above others if you have economic constraints. So that was my big takeaway from this, is that a lot of this is a values call by the county board. There are some exceptions, and we've noted those because there are certain services that are required within certain departments, but the detail often is not.
For instance, an example of that would be a lot of the statutory language says deputy. You may name a deputy or should name a deputy, but it doesn't go any further than that. And it doesn't say that, for instance, it doesn't say the deputy has to be full-time. Doesn't say they have to be But as a deputy, they might have to be accredited or recognized as a deputy, so.
Typically, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, but there
Yes.
are some exceptions to
Yeah.
that. And so you have to really go to each of those offices that have deputies to
Right.
read that language. In some of the cases, it gives the county board the ability to decide whether or not we want to pay a salary to the deputy. In other statutes, it never mentions that. So the assumption is that they get a deputy. Some of this is open to interpretation, and you'd probably have to take it to a court case to really figure it out. But you're right. We are not always required to have a state statute never says full-time equivalent deputy. And there might be an exception or two at the sheriff's department, but Melissa knows that one a lot better than I do because she researched that.
Actually, there was a court case with the sheriff's deputies, and it does specifically state that the county board has the sole authority to determine how many deputies are needed in a county. So, so that there is language, and that's only because it went to court, and there's I think you would call it a attorney general statement or something, but anyway, and I did list that reference in there with that, so that people could look at the actual language.
So for the purposes of budgeting for 23 and then beyond, I would think this is information that goes beyond.
I think this information is pivotal for the discussions that will be happening if they happen at the committee level.
Committee levels.
Yes, I mean, I think that the committees should dig into these statutes to make sure they really truly understand what levels of services are mandated. And use that information to come forward with ideas.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I comment?
Yes, Ms. Gentis.
It's just a question, because I printed this out so I could read it better. And I'm like, because it's mandated, does that mean it has to be solely for our county? And I'm not just picking on veteran services here, but I just make that, can we share that with another county since we both would appoint someone? Or maybe some of the health and human services? I was just want to know when it's mandated, does that mean solely one county? Or does that mean mandated that we offer that service?
Ms. Luck?
There are many areas in the statutes where it specifically talks about our ability to combine departments, either with other counties or with other bodies in the county that could provide the service, and we would contract with them. So there's very specific language in many areas where you are specifically allowed to consolidate or cooperate. So and I have never came across one where it specifically said you could not combine services with another entity. There may be, again, they're complicated and there's a lot. And as much as I appreciate the comment about sending it to the counties association, I would want a more in-depth review of it before we did that, just because I'm not 100% sure that we caught it all. We did our best.
Thank you. Supervisor Severson, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To go along with the veteran service officer, that part of it, I believe that the veteran service officer has to be a veteran. That's what we have to have, that aspect of that for that position. However, their benefits specialist doesn't have to be solely for that office. Like, I think that we could provide services through Health and Human Services through one of their staff members as like a part-time employee, or another role where they are a disability specialist for a little bit, and then 24 hours or whatever it is a week, then they can do the veterans part of it. So there's aspects where these deputies and staff that we have, we can probably consolidate a little bit more throughout some other departments and other part-time people that we have in the county to make those whole.
Thank you.
So I'm encouraged looking at that too.
Yep. Administrator Langrecht, do you have anything else before we go to the directive resolutions?
A question in regards to for staffing reports, looking for some clarifications on that. So I know that we have an authorization table that we have internally that we try to keep track of all of our positions, and they're kept in conjunction of full-times and part-times and casuals and reserves kind of a capacity. I don't know if all of our comparable counties have a comparable type of a document. So I don't know, I have to reach out to them yet and say, do you have this type of a document? Does it look like this? That coming back as well, I know we've talked on full-time equivalencies, if we were going to try to match it up with full-time equivalencies per office, or if it's per job title. I'm just trying to gauge on if there's any more discussion points on what you'd like to see for a staffing study, if it's across the entire county as well, or if it's in particular to certain types of departments or functions. If there's any more clarity there, that would be most helpful, as that'll be a bit of a project if it's the full expanse on, we'd like to know what the other counties are across your entire county.
Any thoughts, any questions, any comments, and either an agreement or a question?
Well, the only thing I would say, Clint, I have a tendency to agree with you, because you don't know what level of service the other counties are providing. You know what I mean? So as this document just went through and told us that you have to do this, but they don't care how many people do it, right? So depending on the county, they may be in caseload and workload, whatever it may be. You know, a lot of this is, of course, it stems towards how many people do I need to do X amount of work? You know what I mean? And how much work is there for X amount of people? Now, maybe I look at this all the time where I'm at, but it's different. You know, I have volume that comes in, so I need more people to run that volume. If volume leaves, I don't need those people. So I look at that the same way as this. You know, the volume of work that comes into the county, wherever it may be, there's going to be certain fix that you have to have. You know what I mean? If we've got to have 25 people plow roads because it takes 25 trucks to plow the roads, whatever the case may be, you'll have 25 positions. If you need 3 cooks or you need 10 caseworkers or whatever that may be, because of the amount of work that's there. So to me, this is more of the department head needs to say, okay, this is how much work's getting done, and this is how much should be expected, and they should come back to us with that, because I don't see how you're going to have a hard time comparing apples to apples, even across all the counties, just because every county is different enough, I would think, of the amount of service that may be in that same group that it provides. So I think it'd get real muddy real quick. But I guess it would be, okay, we need to cut money out of this budget. Where's the majority of our money spent? Well, it's spent in labor. And how much work do I have and how much labor do I need? And have a very clear thing saying, you know what, I don't have this much labor here, but I do need more here. And making them department heads balance that out. It should be there. In my opinion, the department head should be telling me how much labor they need. That's the way I look at it, because they're the ones running the department. But they need to be honest enough to say, hey, I don't need this, you know what I mean? I don't need this much labor here, whatever the case may be. To me, all this stuff comes down, we hire department heads. Department heads need to run their department. But on the same token, department heads need to know that they need to run their department as lean as they can run. If we want to put wages that we're talking about over the next 10 years, we're not going to be able to sustain, even with a referendum, most likely. The labor is, how do I word this? It's going to cost more every year, right? No matter what. And if we can't just look at it, the department head, in my opinion, has to take that and say, okay, if I want my people to get a 5% raise next year, am I a little long on labor somewhere? Well, I don't need that anymore. Does this mean a part-time position? Does this mean that I don't need that position anymore? And start tightening up their budgets. To me, it should fall on that. It should fall on the department head. I get the committees, but we don't operate the department. The department head operates the department. They are the ones that need to make them decisions. I mean, they need to know guidance. If we need to reduce costs, tell me where you're going to reduce costs. To me, that's what I think we should be doing. I think we get in the weeds a little bit. These all the committees we're on, I can't go in there and tell somebody at the campus, you need to get rid of, you need to get rid of it. I don't run the campus. That's not my job to run the campus. I'm on a committee. So I think it needs to go to the department heads and say, hey, we need to cut as much as we can cut. You tell me what you're going to cut and go from there.
The difficulty is, if I may comment, Mark, is that we're all part-time. We're not full-time. We're not there all, that's why we went the administrator route to give us a handle on this stuff.
And I agree with you completely, Marty. That's my point. That's what I'm saying. The department head is the person that has to take direction. Okay, we need to cut, we're $1 million over budget. You got all 20 department heads and we're $1 million over budget. Every one of you need to come back. We need to cut $1 million. I mean, that's what happens in the world I live in. And I'm assuming it happens in most people's world. But us committee people, we're not engaged enough to, I don't know what you can cut or what you can't cut. And I don't think anybody expects me to know, you know.
No, I would say though, from a department head's perspective, is they're going to be looking at committees on, when they're coming to conversation points on what services do you want to not provide anymore to the community or significantly reduce. That's where, that's where we need your input as a representative on the community.
I get that. And it probably went off topic here, but at the beginning of the question, I think it's going to be really difficult to compare county to county on the service because it's the amount of service that they're providing.
Yeah.
I think that's where you're going to run into a lot of trouble. I mean, we didn't have any wage studies from Crawford County. Crawford County is the same size as we are. And probably the same level of income, same level of everything. And we have nothing from Crawford County. And that's going to be the best representation of what we are, I would say. So, I mean, we're just kind of up in the air here. But not to go against what everybody's thinking, but I think it's going to be, you could have a rough estimate, but you're just not going to get a good enough number to say, okay, we can have 10 people on the highway department, 20 people on this, and 20 people. I don't think you can get that good a number.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I respond to?
Yeah,
Mr. Cooey?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so I'm going to provide a little bit of a different perspective on it. So if we don't have any idea, I wonder sometimes if we're overstaffed or understaffed in some departments. And I'm sorry to pick on Ms. Triggs, but there was a question that came up about the staffing level in her office a couple of years back. So I got in touch with the Register of Deeds offices in several counties that are kind of like ours. And I found out that every single one of those, except one, there was one exception. I remember I talked to the lady. They all had 2 full-time staff in the Register of Deeds office. That kind of told me, okay, we're within the norm here. We're not going off on our own with having 2 people in the Register of Deeds office in a county our size. If we don't know what those staffing levels are, if we don't know if we're out in left field in a particular department, then how do we get these dollar amounts to be roughly fair that we're handing down for cuts? And I think a department head might be kind of defensive about how many staff they have in their particular department. So I'm just worried if we farm that out to departments, I'm just a little worried that we might not get the information we need to make some tough choices. And I know we need their advice, and there'll be differences between counties, about what they provide. And we should ask that question to different counties, is there anything unique you provide? And the HHS one about the caseworkers or the economic support management, is that the division? We have all these extra people because we're the cheapest county to work in, so these outside counties are funding a bunch of people within our division. Well, that's good to know. We better know that when we compare those numbers, but we never know the numbers. That's our biggest cost. And we're the ones, the state legislature and governor say, you decide how many staff are in each department. So I've just been a little nervous about getting farmed out to all these committees and departments and not knowing. It's a big black hole of costs for us. So, thank you.
Mr. Seaver, comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I guess my mic is on.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. This is Supervisor Turk. I have to leave the meeting for a work commitment.
Okay, you're excused, although.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your attendance. Mr. Seaver.
Yes, just to maybe add a dimension to both Mark's, Mr. Cooey's remarks as well as Mr. Lopez. It's pretty well established that or some departments will have a tendency to protect their own turf. And it's often difficult to get an objective evaluation of the performance of that office, including the department head, without some sort of a measuring device. You know, Mr. Curry's field, his industry, often depends upon engineering and efficiency experts who come in and independently evaluate the production of a department and does a task analysis and looks at the standards and provides that to the industry. Mr. Langrick would need, he doesn't have time to go in and do a task analysis in every department. He has to depend, and the committees have to depend on the integrity of the department head in terms of getting objective information. The only way you can really be confident sometimes in the productivity of a department and its staffing level is to have an independent professional analysis of that department's work based upon established standards. Mr. Lopez is right. Putting it off and depending upon the department has to give you a report is subjective to some degree, more in among some than in others. There is just a natural human tendency to protect turfs, and you have to remove that bias to have an objective evaluation of productivity and staffing levels. That's the only way to do it. If you want to look at staff and make decisions about how many people should be there and how much work is they're doing, you have to have an objective metric based, evidence-based evaluation independently.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right, Clint, you have clear direction there then.
No, less than Crystal, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. I'm wondering if I could move down to item number 10 on my agenda, which is discussion and possible action on directive resolutions. And those resolutions are, according to our packet of materials. Let's see, let me get back here. They would be
This is in your folder, items number 1002 through 1008. 7 resolutions. First one directed towards City County Committee, second one towards Education Committee, third Fair and Recycling Parks, fourth Joint Ambulance, fifth Land Zoning Committee, the sixth Pine Valley and Child Support Committee, and then the 7th one to the various standing committees, including Public Works, Public Safety, Finance and Personnel, and yes, in one.
is that 7? I think there are 7. Question.
Yep, there is 7 in total.
Okay. I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like a motion to send these to the county board, which will then act upon them and send them down to the various standing committees. So discussion, appropriate discussion, and work can begin. Tell me what your thoughts are. Somebody brave enough to make that motion? Manny? So you're making a motion for all 7 as the way they're written to go down for consideration. Okay, do I have a second to that?
I will make that second, but then I will immediately be asking for amendments.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So now we have an overall motion, just so everyone understands. We have the 7 resolutions before us, which we had anyway, but now we've made it semi-official. Okay, discussion and offering of possible amendments.
I would like to offer an amendment, and this would be to all of them.
Okay,
I guess I will preface this by saying that I think that I understand the intent of the language, but it's causing a lot of stress, and I don't think we need it. I think that if we decide, so essentially what I'm talking about is I would like to strike the be it further resolved if the whatever committee is unable to complete these tasks and deliver a recommendation to finance and personnel by the date the Richland administrator is tasked with, and then for each resolution, there's specific tasks. I understand wanting that language in there because I think what we're asking for is we want to make sure that committees do due diligence. And if they don't, then we want to have some kind of consequences to what will happen. However, I think that we should cross that bridge when we get to it. If a committee does not come forward with some kind of ideas and or recommendations, at that point, we could enact another resolution that says that we will then do whatever we want, which one of the options would be to send this to the administrator, authorizing the administrator or the finance and personnel standing committee. So if we strike that language, we're still getting what we want, which is we want each committee to look at these issues, do in-depth due diligence, and come with recommendations. So that's my proposed amendment. The first amendment would be to strike that language from all of the resolutions.
and is that language uniform in all the resolutions?
So the be it further resolved language, I believe, is the same, other than it changes the committee name.
Right.
It's the tasked with language is slightly different, but my motion would be to strike the be it further resolved and any instructions as to what the administrator would be tasked with.
Okay, do we have a second to that amendment?
So I'll second it.
Okay, Sean Murphy Lopez seconds. All right, let's take a vote on that amendment then, to change the language and not bring it back to the administrator necessarily, but bring it back to.
Well, no, we would still have that option to do that
Yes,
later, but
right.
it's just not in this resolution.
Supervisor Severson, do you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do. I totally agree with Melissa on this, to eliminate that last further be resolved out of there. So for example, what this is giving you is the administrator, and how many are here right now to make this quorum? There's 5 of you. So it makes the administrator and the 5 of you solely in charge of if let's say the Parks Commission or the fair doesn't come up with a decision made by a certain date, that gives you 5 the sole power to liquidate any county assets without going to county board and getting the extra votes that is needed for the majority, or consulting with your 16,000 or 17,000 constituents that this stuff serves. I think this is grossly the most problem of what a lot of people are upset about.
So you're in favor of the amendment?
Wholeheartedly.
Okay,
It's too much power right here given to such a very small group of people.
I think it's almost, it's almost, well, if you don't do it, the administrator's gotta do it. I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's kind of that sort of thing.
If we wanted, I sat on the administrator study committee, and I think our consensus there was that we didn't want to have an executive form of government. We wanted to have an administrator, so where the county board still had control and the citizens still had control. Because the executive form of government, he could veto what the county board does. It's essentially kind of what this is doing in a roundabout way.
Thank you. That clarifies it a little bit for me. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll make
Any
one quick comment. I'm not questioning the county administrator's authority in any way. I don't feel like he's overstepping. I just feel like, I think we can accomplish what we want without this language, and so let's do that.
Okay, let's vote on that change then. All those in favor of taking that language out and basically giving the authority to finance personnel and the entire county board, I guess, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, okay. Now, were there other amendments?
I don't know if this is an amendment, but why are we just limiting to these 7 entities? Why doesn't this language go to everybody?
Well, these are the mandated or non-mandated.
Yeah, I get that, but why aren't we doing it to everybody? I think that's what the biggest maybe complaint in the whole county from the feedback I'm getting. Why doesn't everybody get this?
But the next part of the budget recommendation is a $350,000 cut to HHS, a substantial cut to
Understood,
law
understood.
enforcement.
But you see where I'm at. What I would say is, you got 7 of these and we have 10 departments or 12 departments. Why don't all 12 departments get the same language?
They're Supervisor Cooey, they're based at the supervisory committees. So like on the one example with the various committees, it's got multiple directives to go to like Public Works and find $350,000 for the multiple departments that respond to that committee.
I think that's probably where some of the confusion is with the people of the county. This is all they see. They didn't pick up on the rest of it, right? So they didn't pick up that we're going to go to Health and Human Services for 350,000 and Highway for 350,000 and so on and so forth. So I'm fine with this, but I think we need to make that aware to everybody. If nothing else, just so that everybody understands that this is not all that's happening. Maybe more emphasis on it for lack of better.
Thank you. If only we had a media representative here to hear that. Oh, wait, we do? Okay, thanks. Have we voted? No, we haven't, have we?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Gottschall, I have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Gotcho, go.
I would like to propose another amendment. I will see if it gets a second. But I would propose that we remove the Simons resolution from consideration today. The rationale behind that is I believe it forces a decision upon our city partners that is a joint committee, and I don't believe that we have solicited enough feedback from our city partners, and by saying we're removing our levy, we're essentially ending that partnership with all intents and purposes. So that's my rationale for removing that one.
Okay, do we have a second to that, removing Simons?
I'll second.
Second by Cooey. Discussion, how does this, why is this any different? Yeah, it involves the city, but
Mr. Chair,
yes, go ahead.
and my comment would be that we are not saying that we're ending our partnership with Simons. We're saying that we're going to investigate our options, and it's to be determined. And I feel like the city has plenty of opportunity in the next year to come, and they're probably already present at the committee meeting, which this resolution would be going to. So I guess I don't see why we would remove that, because we really do want to have those conversations about other options available for Simons.
Did you hear that, Mr. Gotcho?
I did. I would
Do you have a
respond.
response? Do you have a response?
I do. Yes, thank you. It clearly says in line number 5 that we're working toward developing a course of action in which no foreseeable county levy dollars will be contributed. I believe this city, I'm projecting, I guess, that the city's opinion is not the same. So if we're saying via resolution that we want to remove our financial contribution, I view that as ending the partnership with the city.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Luck, go ahead.
That all of those things say develop a course of action if possible. So in my mind, that means that there may be a course in which it doesn't make sense or it's not possible, and therefore we would decide not to separate ourselves from Simons. And that's true of, I think, all of these resolutions. All of the language says if possible. So that's how I interpret it.
Okay, Ms. Gentis, you have a comment.
I like the first amendment that you made. It took out the deep threat that I thought eliminated the committees from having a good discussion. Now we can have a discussion and we have time without that threat over our heads. But I think maybe you want to put in the resolution something about if the referendum passes and you don't need to do these cuts, because that's partly why we're having the referendum, and maybe you don't need to put that in because maybe the referendum will, but I think you need to consider that.
Okay, then that's referendum cancellation language, and speaking as a board member and as a member of Finance and Personnel, I would be afraid to put that in these resolutions because it might give a sense of hope that may not be there. In other words, maybe the referendum, we haven't talked about the referendum yet, but maybe it's plan A, but there's got to be a plan B. Even the schools have that. If you don't get the referendum, what are we going to do? So.
Well, that's true, but I'm not sure I appreciate your no hope comment. I think
Well,
we want to, we're supposed to be tasked with finding every different way we can. And I think this is one of the ways we're trying to do it.
But don't pin all our hopes on, or
No, I just
everything on
said
the
if that
referendum.
would, you don't know which ones it'll be.
Yeah, okay. Further discussion, if somebody else weigh in, what do you think?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
yeah.
Mr. Murphy Lopez.
So Mr. Gotchel's motion to amend, so I'm kind of somewhere in the middle here. I don't know if we can come up with a compromise, but I think a lot of the language in points 1 through 6 on this resolution about Simons, to me, it's kind of complex the way it's laid out, and it does sound a little threatening too about ending services. And I guess I'm with Simons in this particular case, and there is actually at least one other case where I'm kind of interested, maybe two, and then something similar. Could we instead could we encourage the Simons Natatorium Board and staff to explore the transfer of Simons to a nonprofit organization instead and return to us with a report, just so that we could learn more instead of having this, we are ending service with you sort of language. It's very ominous sounding.
Well, isn't that point number 9 under economic development operations?
I think so, and I think I'm a little more comfortable with just that paragraph. I mean, I guess, so Mr. Gotchel, I kind of like where you're going with this, but I just think we still need to at least look at some other options and see if there's a potential better model than a government model. Maybe there's not, but could we at least look at that without all this other language in here?
So what are you recommending? Well, we've got a motion now to amend, so.
Can we handle two at once? Can I make one?
Well, yeah, you could ask Supervisor Gotchel if he'll accept an amendment to his amendment, perhaps.
Or if I could make a separate motion to amend and you vote on them separately, handle one by one. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe no one wants a second mine, so that would.
Okay, well, tell us if you had the opportunity to make a motion, what would it be? What would it sound like, Supervisor Murphy?
My motion to amend would be to strike points 1 through 6 and replace it with a motion to encourage the Simon Natatorium Board and Simon staff to explore the transfer of Simons to a nonprofit organization, including research of similar nonprofit models, and return to Finance and Personnel with a report. And I would prefer that this got done earlier so we can figure out how to meld this with the referendum, but that's not part of my motion to amend. I think by, say, October 31st of 2022, instead of stretching this out so long.
Supervisor Gotchel, did you catch that language? We don't have a motion yet, but what Sean is suggesting is taking out the first 6, be it further resolved, and replacing it with number 9 under the economic development operations. Would that satisfy your, could you live with that if your motion is defeated up or down?
That's a great question. I would like to personally, but I'm curious to hear the board's thoughts. I would like to vote on them
Okay.
separately.
Then we'll call a vote on the original Gotchel motion. And can you restate that, Tim, please? I'm confused now, so.
Well, my motion was to remove Simons from consideration.
Yes, altogether. All right.
Yes, but I am I don't want to put us in a place where we cannot consider Supervisor Murphy Lopez
Right. And
amendment.
Sean, you seconded the Gotchel motion, did you? No, Mark did. Okay, we're gonna vote on that. Take Simons out altogether. I guess I'll do a roll call because there will be some different opinions. And an aye says take Simons out, a no means leave it in.
Okay, to remove Simon's resolution from going to county board. Now we have Luck.
No.
Manning. Gotchel.
Yes.
Turk. Oh, Turk's gone, right?
Yes.
Cooey.
Yes.
Murphy Lopez.
No.
Brewer.
No.
Failed 4-2.
Okay. Now, I think probably Sean Murphy Lopez has an amendment he'd like to offer.
Can I reread it?
Yes.
Okay, it's a motion to amend to remove points 1 through 6 regarding Simons and replacing it with point that encourages the Simons Natatorium Board and Simons staff to explore the transfer of Simons to a nonprofit organization, including research of similar nonprofit models, and return to the Finance and Personnel Committee with a report by October 31st of 2022.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
Mr. Chair, I would second that.
Thank you, Mr. Gotchel. Okay, it's put in a lot of effort and work on the part of the joint board. However, it's necessary work, so. Everyone knows what we're doing. We're giving the board specific instructions to come up with a model. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we have a revised, amended resolution specifically for Simons. All of the resolutions have been amended with the language suggested by Melissa Luck. Do we have any other changes in any specific resolution?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment, and I'd like to just stick to the same resolution to not get too confusing. We're on 1002, if you're on your iPads.
1002, which one is that?
That's the city county one.
The economic?
Yeah, so I'd like to propose an amendment to basically do something similar with economic development, but just a little different based on what some other counties have done. So it'd be kind of similar, striking points 7 through 11 and replacing it with a motion to encourage the Red Board to explore a public-private partnership where public sources make up half and private sources make up half of the economic development budget, and return to us with a report by that same date.
Okay. So 7 through 11, the economic development operations. And then you would replace that with the Red Board coming up with a public-private partnership, I guess. Okay, do we have a second to that Motion. Luck seconds. Comments, questions? I think this is a good way to approach it personally. I would really hesitate and hate to see red discontinued because I think it has made significant progress. Okay, Mr. Manny.
Comment. Isn't this all kind of getting the cart before the horse? Isn't this all going to be dependent upon the referendum, or are we not certain if we're having a referendum yet?
Well, we haven't talked about it yet, so.
And that's kind of why I wondered if that shouldn't have been first. If we get a referendum and that passes, this is all kind of for nothing in my mind.
It depends on what's included in the referendum, Mr. Manning, because the referendum committee will probably, they'll be talking about a lot of things to include, and they're gonna have to be clearly delineated and money hooked attached to them. I don't think we can just vaguely put out a resolution that says, do you want us to continue everything we're doing? Yes or no? That'd be nice, but, and leave it in our hands. So I think we gotta have a plan B.
Oh, I agree with that. Sure.
Okay.
Mr.
Luck?
Chair, yeah,
Ms. Luck?
I just want to, I think that we need to be very careful with the referendum question, that we don't want to appear, I think all of these resolutions are asking some very important questions that we do need to answer. Regardless of how we muck around with the language in the resolution, we still need to be looking at what services we can and should provide going into the future. And if we're just gonna, I don't think our citizens will appreciate us just saying, we don't want to make these hard decisions, so we just want you to give us more money. I do think that these resolutions are incredibly important for making sure that we look seriously at our services and our staffing levels.
Self-examination is never a wasted effort, so, and that's exactly what we're doing here. Okay, anything else? All right, then we've got amended versions. We've got the 7 resolutions. I'm ready to vote. Are you guys? I'm gonna call for a vote. And-
We got to vote on the motion to amend.
We haven't done that yet? Okay, we're voting on the motion to amend. And that's the red board, putting it into a 50-50 thing. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Okay. Now we've got the amended resolutions, and I'm inclined to ask for a motion to move them all to the county board for consideration.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make, I'm sorry, but I've got a few of these. So I know
Okay,
you're
let's go through them.
get out of
quickly
here,
then.
but, so the next one would be for, Pine Valley.
Yes,
So for Pine Valley,
which one is that on the,
let's see, that's 1007.
okay. All right,
So this one, I'd like to propose a motion to amend it, striking points 1 and 2. And replacing it with a motion to, or replacing it with language to direct the Pine Valley and Child Support Committee to explore the possibility of Pine Valley setting aside funds annually to cover 50% of their mortgage payments of the Pine Valley building and returning to Finance and Personnel by the end of October with a report.
and you're replacing what part? What part are you replacing?
Parts, numbers 1 and 2 in that resolution. And I guess my reasoning here is this is talking about contracting all services and planning out the future sale of the building and grounds. And I'm just not in support of that. I think that's too extreme, but I do think we could be opening up some room in our capital debt levy so that we can start funding other priorities at the county, because we have a lot of other priorities. And I think our efforts we might get more bang for our buck if we go there. I don't see how we're ever going to really realistically sell Pine Valley.
Okay, you're making a motion to take out the service consideration matrix language, right? And the contract services for a community village, which talks about operations of healthcare, medical equipment are contracted out and ownership remain with Richland County. And lease operations would include a guaranteed lease revenue to the county. So in other words, the county be renting the building out and someone else would be running it. Okay. So you're suggesting those things be eliminated and simply replaced by an amendment that says Pine Valley has to come up with 50% of the loan payment, whatever we're calling it, each year. And they almost do that, but right now, but would anyone second that amendment?
I will second for discussion.
Okay, Melissa Luck seconds for discussion.
So I think that the point he's adding is a very good one that we do and should explore. But I do agree that I don't think it's reasonable that to think that we could potentially sell those buildings and get, because we still have, I mean, we still owe on that till 2034 or 35, right?
We'd get about half what they're worth,
Right.
probably.
So I still feel like,
What we
I feel like
owe.
because we always get this question though, I still feel like it would be worth going through the effort of figuring out if it would ever make sense to do that as a possibility, to contract out and try, because I don't think it does, but we're going to have this question hanging out there if we don't look into it. So I would be more in favor of adding the third bullet point than removing that second one,
Adding the amendment as a third bullet point.
instead of removing the idea that we could explore and develop a course of action, again, if possible, where operations of healthcare administration, IT, and medical equipment, would be contracted out.
Well-
I think that's a good question to ask.
The amendment says we're taking out the first two things.
I know.
Okay, I could live with that, Mr. Chair, so I'll change my amendment to
Are
add
you
what I.
accepting an amendment to your amendment or a friendly?
Or
She
saying,
was the second.
we'll, change mine to, instead of striking 1 and 2, adding a point 3.
Okay, got it.
And the point 3 would have a sooner date because presumably you want that information before the referendum question is answered. Okay.
Okay, so are we ready to vote on that? I think we are. So we're adding a third point under Pine Valley child support operations. And that is Pine Valley would pay 1/2 the mortgage. At least 1/2, right? I mean, if they want to pay it all, would you object to that? No. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Supervisor Gatchell, one quick question. I don't know that I can vote yes, particularly for item number 3, not because I don't think it has merit. I don't know enough about Pine Valley's finances to know if that's prudent.
Right now, we take money from Pine Valley's each year to help us with their budget. And if memory serves, and my institutional knowledge of this is that when we set up Pine Valley, the agreement initially was the county will pay half, Pine Valley comes up with half, paying the nut for the building loan. But we've changed that a little bit over the years because we just take the money they are paying, would have paid, and instead using it under our general operations budget. So, and then we make the payment totally. And in latter years, what is that amounted to, Mr. Langrick?
It's average around $300,000 that come back. Tom and his folks, they've built up their contingency fund, as encouraged to through our auditors and through our bond counsel. They do put some aside for their capital improvement projects as well, to build that up so that they're not coming and asking us for capital improvement types of initiatives. And then moving forward into the next year's budget with 2023 current guidance is about 300,000 that we're asking that they put into what they call their debt service fund that we're planning on taking and supplementing general operations. So if that increases to a $750,000, then that's going to have to come from not only what we're anticipating of about $300,000, but then also it's going to have to come from money that's being put away for their capital projects to not come us and ask us for that. And with that bottom line number that's coming back to us too is consideration for the fluctuations on increased expenses, and then also though for keeping census and keeping revenues up. So it'd be a balance.
Our payment each year for the Pine Valley buildings is what on the
About 1.5.
1.5? Okay. So there you have it. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Seep, did you have a comment?
Is serviced by a debt levy. The taxpayers have taken on the burden of paying off that debt, and therefore any funds that were transferred from Pine Valley to the county were used not to service the debt, but to help in their general fund. But in the beginning and continuously, the taxpayers are paying that debt through a debt levy. We increased the tax levy when we built that building with public support. So I think the burden of $750,000 is excessive, and I'm sure that the committee will come back to you with a reasoned and responsible answer to this amendment. I do think it's excessive and burdensome to the future of Pine Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Seep, and I'll give you one reason why. Our bond rating has recently gone up for the county, and one of the reasons cited was the improved financial position of your nursing home. And the reason that came through that way is because of the healthy reserves that Pine Valley has been able to accumulate.
Which is overall to the county's advantage.
Right. Mr. Manning.
Mike. Was that initially when it was built, my understanding was within 5 years it would be totally self-sufficient. Is there any reason that has not happened?
It is self-sufficient.
Well, not at a $900,000 tax levy to the taxpayers, it's not.
I'm sorry,
Well,
that's a separate and different.
We can debate this quite a while, so, but
Mr. Chair, can I speak to my motion to amend?
Yes.
I just want to answer a couple of concerns here. So
okay,
on Mr. Gotcho's part, my language was to direct the Pine Valley and Child Support Committee to explore the possibility of Pine Valley setting aside funds to annually cover half of their mortgage payments. So it's not, boxing them into a corner. It's coming back to us with a report, so something a little more detailed than we've been getting, just with kind of verbal answers. Regarding the Mr. Manning, the self-sufficiency. So there was a report done by a consultant, and I requested that report at some point to see, because I kept hearing this from constituents. They would tell me that. They would say Pine Valley was going to make their debt payments. And there was a consultant, and yeah, Mr. Rizlo gave it to me. I see him up there. And it said something about in their forecast for their financial future, they were laying out how Pine Valley could cover half of their mortgage payments. They never projected that they would cover them totally. They projected they could be self-sufficient, and then they could also cover half of the mortgage payments. So that's kind of where I didn't bring that, I didn't make that up on my own. That's where I got the number from, so.
and I know the county used to give Pine and all the amounts for general operations. And how many years, when did we discontinue that, 3 years ago? They said, no, we don't need that anymore, because we're self-sufficient. So, yes and no, Gary. Like many of the things that we talk about, yes. Okay, so we've got a motion to amend, I believe, don't we? We haven't voted on that, I don't think. Melissa, you seconded for discussion. And Sean has said his language is, he doesn't believe it boxes them in. He believes that it asks them to explore whether or not that's possible, I believe, so. Do we need a roll call on this? Okay, we'll have a roll call, so all those in favor of Sean's resolution,
Did you want,
restated?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so it'd be a motion to amend the resolution to add a third bullet point that would direct the Pine Valley and Child Support Committee and Pine Valley staff to explore the possibility of Pine Valley setting aside funds to annually cover 50% of mortgage payments at the
Okay,
Pine Valley building and return to finance and personnel by the end of October with a report.
okay, so yes, adds a third bullet point, 50%. No, you're not in favor of that. So call the roll, please, Cheryl.
Manning. Gotcha.
Yes.
Hui. Murphy Lopez.
Yes.
Brewer.
No,
Luck. You are tied 3-3.
a tie, so I guess the motion's defeated. In that case, any other amendments to the resolutions under consideration?
Unless you all hate me and you want me to stop.
I hate you, Sean.
Okay. So going to the one on fair and parks and recycling. That one. So
Which bullet?
this is 1004.
1004, thank you.
Okay, so under the fair one, kind of similarly to the one on Simon's, we're removing points 1 through 6 and replacing them with a language to direct the Fair Recycling and Parks Committee and fair staff to explore the transfer of the fairgrounds to a nonprofit agricultural society, including research on peer counties with a nonprofit fair model, and return to this committee by October 31st with a report. And then points striking in total 7 through 14. 7 through 9 is recycling. They take no money off of the property tax levy. And points 10 through 14, I think is, I just think it sends the wrong message that I don't even know how, I can't even begin to imagine how we get rid of our parks. So I just can't go along. I can't go along with that. So that's why I'm proposing that.
So
if you want me to separate those out, I can. But that's that resolution.
for the purpose of time, probably don't need to separate them, but for the fairground fair, you're saying strike everything, but let's sit down and look at doing a nonprofit. Okay, and then for the recycling, we're taking that out because it doesn't use any operational levy. And parks, you want that out because how can we have an attractive county without parks? I'm adding something there, but. Okay, so we've got those amendments. Do we have a second? Hang on, Mr. Severson. Do I have a second? Yes, thank you, Mr. Manning. Mr. Severson?
We're right here at Fairmont, less than a month away, and to have what he's suggesting is crazy. Be done by October? We wouldn't even have time to talk unless you want us to have meetings every day now.
When's a good date for you then?
I don't know, we got fair ramping up here pretty soon.
December 31st?
Probably would be okay, or November.
Okay, November 30th. I'll take November 30th.
Well, that's still, obviously, Carol, you're gonna have to go to other counties that do it that way, or other entities, I should say.
Crawford County gives $180,000 in their county.
Yeah. But I know that Vernon County is an agrarian society or something, right?
Correct, but we don't have one in this community, so the community's got to step up and make one.
Well, there you go. Yeah. But can you do that and have it ready by November 30th?
I don't know what the community.
I doubt that.
He's not saying he has to have it done. He's saying a report on what other counties are doing and what ideas as to how it would be done.
Just exploring the transfer of the fairgrounds to a nonprofit by.
Okay.
Carrie, I'm okay with a December 31st date if you need a little more time, but I don't want to stretch out too far too, because we need to know, are we going to put that on the operating referendum? Fairgrounds, we might have to make that decision at some point, so I wouldn't want to kick that can too far down the road. So,
all right. Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Carla. Can I just ask a quick question of
Yeah, Carla,
Supervisor Murphy-Lopez?
please do.
So I appreciate the deadline, and I would like to know if we could at least extend it into just even November. Not only is it fair time, but then it's state reporting and it's also recycling grant time. And it's a very difficult time with the minimal staff. So if I can just have at least until the end of November, that would be much appreciated.
Is that sufficient till the end of November? Yeah, okay.
I feel that would be sufficient, yes.
it's fine with me if it's okay with, I think you seconded.
Second, I thought was taking it off proposal to sell, that we would look into privatizing it as an option. So Sean's, again, motion was to take off the option to sell and but bring up the option to privatize, correct?
I can read it again if you'd like.
Go ahead, Sean.
So it'd be a motion to amend the resolution replacing points 1 through 6 under the fairground with directing the Fair Recycling and Parks Committee and Fair staff to explore the transfer of the fairgrounds to a nonprofit agricultural society, including research on peer counties with a nonprofit fair model, and return to finance and personnel by November 30th, 2022 with a report. And then eliminating points 7 through 9 under recycling and eliminating points 10 through 14 under parks.
So I think it does what you want it to do, Gary. It's not suggesting that it be sold,
My plan is to not have it up for sale.
right?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Severson?
to explore options to have some type of a nonprofit to relinquish counties' sole responsibility of the maintenance and maintain that grounds does mean that the deed then would transfer to another nonprofit organization. For therefore, the county then would essentially maybe sell for $1, a penny, give away. They would not retain ownership. So the county was still not really. You're just adding on another aspect of that. Because if you're wanting it to go to a private, essentially a private, not for profit, you're essentially relinquishing the grounds publicly from being public property.
Okay.
Because then it's in the control of a nonprofit who says that they can have this and have that and not have this and do that.
So I guess, Gary, the answer to your question would be, even though that language has been taken out, it may be the recommendation by the committee that it actually happen in order to transfer it to a private nonprofit. Sometimes those things have to be done that. But I don't think, I know, I'm aware of the public outcry right now. Oh, they're going to sell the fair. Well, that And that certainly was never the intent. It was simply exploring this transfer of ownership, so someone other than the county could be responsible. So, all right, we've got that motion to amend uh, in a second, I believe. So are we ready to vote on this one? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're opposed. Cooley opposes. Thank you. Motion carries. Anything else, Sean?
Yes,
Okay.
okay, so the campus, let's see which one that is. Remember,
I think your motions are wonderful and I agree with most of them. But I think when you got down to the committee level, all this could have been discussed and then brought back, but we'll go along with it right now. It's just my opinion. And which one is that, did you say?
it's 10:03.
10:03.
So with this one, it's kind of similar. I guess how I'd say, I think it's the tone that's kind of getting people a little riled up here. And so I think here, if we struck points 1 through 5, and if we directed the education committee to explore two things: the return of recruiting and admissions from the UW Platteville campus to the UW Richland campus, and two, a dollar for dollar match with the UW Richland Foundation for capital projects, not to exceed $100,000 a year, in exchange for the county committing that we will continue to allocate a minimum of 20 grand a year for insurance, which is what we do right now, and $100,000 for capital maintenance projects.
Do we do 20,000 plus the 35, I think it is, that we put in right now? Is that
This year we did 20 plus 20,
20
but
plus 20?
assuming our capital plan passes, we currently have $140,000 in our 2023 budget for the campus. So this would be a little less than that. I think the reason I'm proposing it this way is I've been working with Supervisor Gentis and some other people in the community. They've uncovered some pretty deep problems at the campus and our relationship with Platteville. And some things have been happening with recruiting and admissions that are actually kind of killing our campus. And if we can somehow use this as leverage to get Platteville to do the right thing and return recruiting and admissions to this community, I believe people will send their kids. I believe people will go to this campus again. But because they have been discouraging people from applying to our campus, this has been causing big problems. So if we can somehow leverage it to get our enrollment back up. And then I don't know that the UW Richland Foundation will do this, but I did talk to their president. And he said at their September meeting, they were going to discuss the possibility of capital funding for the campus. So I think if we could somehow figure out ways to get some matching money to our money, the investment would go a lot further. So that's what I'm trying to do with this. I'm trying to bring back more matching monies into our campus. And I talked to Supervisor Gentis about this, and she was supportive of it.
Okay, so you made a motion to amend. Do we have a second to that motion? That motion? Okay, the motion dies for lack of a second. Yes, you may.
Am I on? No. I think we would have the leverage it would make a huge impact. Because currently they're thinking that you're going to cut everything, and so they're cutting more because of that. And if we have the leverage that we are dedicated to it, I think that will turn things around. So I would appreciate a second on that.
You think we're at the tipping point? Okay. I'll second it for discussion. So now we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Gotchel.
Yes, Mr. Gotcha, go ahead.
I don't disagree with any of the sentiments that Supervisor Murphy Lopez brought up. With my time on the committee, I do believe that there's deep issues operationally there. I'm at a bit of a quandary as part of an oversight or a finance board telling a tenant how to run their operations through resolution. I asking somewhat rhetorically. I don't know that anybody will respond to that right now, but I just wanted to let the board know that I am struggling with that notion.
Yeah. Thank you. And that, you mean when we say we want to be in charge of admissions and here, not you guys, so we'd be telling Platteville what we want. Mr.
And I don't mean us, the county government, I mean us, the UW Richland.
The UW Richland
campus staff.
And I've seen, I commented on this now, I've seen the chart where drop in enrollment is directly correlated to changes in Platteville policy. I mean, it's just, now you could say that then which came first, you know, did the enrollment cause them to change their policy, or did their policy cause the enrollment to decline? My take on this, though, it doesn't really matter why enrollment declined, and it doesn't really matter because we find ourselves now in charge of a, what is it, 100 and some acre piece of ground with, and the campus is absolutely beautiful. I toured it last week, and I had never been to those labs, for instance. I couldn't believe how well appointed they were. The lab, the chemistry, the physics, amazing. But it doesn't change the fact that we seem to be funding something that doesn't really do anything for the youth of the county because they're going elsewhere now. We had 100 and some international students, and they're great, and it's a wonderful legacy, and it does instill a sense of international geopolitics to Richland Center, which God knows we need. But I don't see how taking away the directives here will accomplish anything different, because even if Platteville says, okay, do your own recruiting, and I wish we'd done that 4 years ago, or whenever John retired, I don't see how it changes it, but maybe somebody else can weigh in. Mr. Seep, you're sitting there, you always have a thought on stuff, so.
I'm not on that campus committee.
Well, you're a resident of the county.
Yeah, well, I very much value the contribution that the campus makes to the quality of life in the county. I think it would be a shame to see it decline. I would like to see some amicable relationship established with UW Platteville and a sense of cooperation. It would be devastating to this community to lose the campus or to lose the college. Perhaps there are other opportunities, such as a merge with the technical college. there may be, there's no question about it. If you have, you had 300 students and now you have 50, you are you're not utilizing the capacity that's available to you, and you can't afford to, financially, you can't afford to maintain that kind of obligation. So, I don't have any answers, but I do have a hope that this can be resolved to the benefit of Richland County and our surrounding communities, because it is a tremendous asset to the community and it has the potential of growing again. I do think that the part of the slowdown has to be related to the pandemic over the last 2 years, and maybe things will turn around to some extent. My hope is for its continuance, and probably in a modified and reduced way, but nevertheless with the involvement and support of the county.
Thank you. I would like to see options explored, such as bringing the tech people in, maybe developing, I guess that would be in conjunction with Platteville, lab science. I'm talking about our various dairy industry, developing either associate degrees or 4-year degrees, probably associate degrees in that field. I mean, zeroing in on the things that we need. Tommy Thompson said he'd done that. Well, they've got people learning how to manage motels up in Baraboo. I don't think we have too much of a need for that. So I hate to see just everything taken out of here and then just those other two things left, Sean.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I offer the same suggestion as I did the last time, where could we just add the language and that would give them the instructions about potentially adding that position, but also keeping them on the course of investigating other options? Does that make sense, or does it not make sense with this one to do that?
No, I think it makes sense, but
Failed last time we tried that.
so we would be adding Sean's two recommendations rather than, well, right now we have a motion. We have a motion right now before us, basically replacing everything with two recommendations, right? And they are, again, make them let us do the recruiting and what else?
Missions, and then a dollar for dollar match
Oh, yeah.
with the UW Richland Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with it here. I think we need to get rid of the language about ending our relationship with the campus. I think that's the wrong move.
Okay, we've got the amendment to the resolution. Are we ready to vote? If all in favor of that resolution?
Roll call.
Roll call. A yes, but a yes also takes out all the other language. This isn't an addition. This is instead of, okay? So a yes means that, a no means there's no change to the resolution. We can then pass it as is or consider other amendments. Okay, please call the roll.
I got it. Gotcha.
No.
Cooey. Whoops, I got the wrong name in there. Murphy Lopez.
Aye.
Brewer.
No.
Luck. Manning. You 1, 2, 3, 5 no's and 1 yes.
Okay, the resolution amendment is defeated.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Gottschall needs to drop. Do you still have quorum without me?
Okay, thank you, Tim, for
Thank-
being here.
I'm spent. I don't have any more.
Well, I'm wondering if another amendment though could be
Yeah.
suggested here. Nobody? No quick thinkers? I'm too tired to think slowly or quickly, so.
Well, you could put yours in.
All right.
Ms. Luck,
Do we want to make the, I mean, I would, let's see if I get a second. I will make the amendment to add those 2 points that Supervisor Murphy Lopez wanted to this. So it would be 6 and 7 of the, regarding the UW campus section of this resolution.
okay. All right, so we would add 6 and 7, and basically they would say, give us our own recruiting and,
But in addition, they would look at other options as well. So
and,
kind of looking at all of it to
yeah,
see.
and develop a sharing with the foundation.
Correct.
Okay, that's a motion made. Is there a second to that motion? Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Yes, Mr. Cooley, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna add 5 and, or 6 and 7, right? Yeah. All right, all those, probably should call roll on this. All those in favor of that, please respond to the roll. A yes adds them, a no. We leave it as is. Call the roll, please.
Cooey. Murphy Lopez,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Luck,
Yes.
Manning. So you have 4 against, or I'm sorry, 4 yeses.
4 yeses, thank you.
5
So
yeses. 5
the
yeses.
amendment is adopted. Anything else, Mr. Lopez, Murphy Lopez? I don't know how many times a meeting I interchange those, Sean, so someday you get, I'll throw a quarter in the jar.
I know who you're talking to.
I know you do. All right. We've got all the resolutions before us. We've got amendments. I think we're ready to vote on sending the resolutions on to the county board in August, it would be, and then from there down to the standing committees to give them a crack at these things. Okay? So a yes means we'll send them on to the board. A no means God knows what. A no means you're not in favor of it. So I think I can just ask for a vote on this.
I'll request a roll call, please.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Cheryl?
Okay, so this is to send all the resolutions as amended to county board.
Yep.
And we are back to Murphy Lopez.
No.
Brewer,
Yes.
Luck, Manning, and Cooey.
Okay,
4 yeses, 1 no.
thank you. The resolutions are sent to county board as amended. All righty, let's go to, are we ready to talk about our corporate council or are
We're on
we?
Item 11, if there was any types of guidance for your
Okay.
referendum committee that is meeting
Yeah, referendum.
on Thursday evening. If there is none, I would recommend if we can scratch 12, I'll bring back in the August meeting, which would take us then to 13, recommendation that we extend with Corporation Counsel Ab Swain, Attorney Wendell for a 2-year contract. The contract is in your folder. It is item number 13A. It is a very concise contract, but would extend at their current rate for 2 years. If we don't renew this one, we can extend on the existing one for 1 year, but this would lock in the same rate for the next 2 years. Had a good relationship with both Attorney Wendell and Eb Swain. Recommend that we consider this. If there's discussion points to be had in either the contract form or in the performance of attorney window, you have an item on here to enter into closed session under E and C to discuss, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I'm also Administrator Langrick if the board has any questions.
well, let's see, Attorney Wendell, thank you for being with us. Have you sat through the whole meeting?
I have.
Okay, attaboy. Any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy Lopez, and seconded by Ms. Luck. I think they've done one heck of a job for us, and I enjoy the, if Mike doesn't know the answer, he can get it. And he doesn't delay, he's right there. So, and he's been to every meeting, and he was even at this one. So, all those in favor of, what is it asking us to do, report?
This should be to recommend resolution for Abswain
Renewal.
Board for renewal.
Yes. In favor of renewal with Abswain, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Congratulations, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Okay, takes us down to number 15, 16, future agenda items. Anything? Now, we'll be having a regular meeting of the personnel and finance on.
Yes, Mr. Chair, next meeting will be scheduled for August 2nd. You comfortable with returning to the county boardroom, Mr. Chair?
I think so. Let's try the county boardroom, August 2nd at 1 o'clock meeting, or, yeah, it's 1 o'clock, I would think. All right, motion to adjourn to August 2nd in the county boardroom, seconded by Manny. We are adjourned. Thank you, thank you, thank you.